I couldn't help but notice the bemused frown that furrowed Dr. Sterling's eyebrows as she exchanged a glance with Nathaniel's caregiver. The other doctor likely believed she was a lunatic, and perhaps rightly so. Amidst the relentless string of misfortunes, a few silver linings emerged, with the removal of Ricky's malevolent offspring topping the list. Now, the assault she endured in police custody could justify her bruised appearance. However, she hadn't yet devised a plan to permanently deter Ricky. She pondered whether she could leverage the attack to goad Sean into dealing with the menace. Yet disposing of Ricky wouldn't solve anything now that his associates were aware of her. Taking a calming breath, she resolved to prioritize saving her marriage with Sean. It was her utmost priority. "Please tell me that woman didn't take away my ability to have children," she said, her voice surprisingly shaky for good reason. "We didn't detect any damage to your womb, Mrs. Cavalier. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have children. You seem healthy and strong. I'm sure you will be fine," Dr. Sterling replied, offering a kind smile. Julia visibly released a sigh of relief. She surprised herself. For someone who detested the idea of children, she was willing to endure that nightmare for Sean. She supposed it either illustrated her desperation to hold on to him or demonstrated that her emotions for him were the most genuine thing she had ever experienced. A knock sounded on the door before it was pushed open, and a nurse peered in, requesting to see Dr. Sterling. The other doctor excused herself, leaving Aria alone with Julia. "We've managed to persuade the police to allow you to stay here until you're strong enough. I would advise you to take this opportunity to allow your body to heal, Mrs. Cavalier," Aria advised. Julia had momentarily forgotten about the police presence. Of course, that issue remained pressing. "Perhaps you could help me persuade your vindictive husband to back off Dr. Mrs. Everly Hawthorne," Julia suggested, her tone tinged with frustration. "He nearly got me killed," she added, her voice carrying a hint of a growl. "You attempted to abduct our sons," Aria snapped, causing Julia to visibly flinch. "That's a grave offense, Julia, in case it hasn't sunk in yet," Aria continued, her fists clenched. "I've already apologized. What more do you want? You've literally gotten my blood. Do you wish for my demise, Doctor?" Julia snapped in exasperation. "All I want is for you to leave my family be, Julia, and focus on mending yours." "Can you manage that?" Aria replied, her anger mirroring Julia's. "What do you think I've been trying to do?" Julia retorted. "And yet you ran?" Aria replied, her gaze piercing. "People who are truly committed to reform don't flee, Mrs. Cavalier. It's those with guilty hearts and ill intentions who do," Aria added with a scowl. "Believe it or not, me leaving had nothing to do with your children," Julia retorted defiantly. Aria scrutinized her as if assessing the sincerity of her words, then turned towards the door. "Could you inform Nathaniel that I wish to speak with him?" Julia asked, causing Aria to pause in her stride. "Why do you need me to do that?" "Don't you have his phone number, or have you forgotten it?" Aria replied, arching an eyebrow. Julia shot her a glare in response. "The police have confiscated my phone, and all I want is for him to back off," Julia growled. "What you need is a lawyer, Mrs. Cavalier. Someone who can keep you on a leash, or else this won't just be between you and Nathaniel, especially if you insist on involving my children," Aria retorted sternly. "Is that a threat, Doctor?" Julia asked through gritted teeth. "I'm a Hawthorne. We don't make threats," Aria replied coolly before leaving. Julia felt a mix of emotions, anger and a surprising pride in the seemingly prim and proper doctor. Her threat sounded fierce, more like the growl of an untamed cat than a mere meow. Earlier on, Aria had felt a twinge of frustration upon learning that her patient had been readmitted to the hospital with even more injuries. Although she wasn't a gynecologist, she was called out of courtesy. She hadn't realized the gravity of the situation until she arrived and met with Dr. Sterling. Initially, Aria suspected that Julia might have done something to cause her miscarriage, but her suspicions were dispelled when she saw police officers lining the corridor outside Julia's hospital room. "Detective Logan Steele, I'd like you to meet Dr. Everly Hawthorne, the owner of Evergreen Memorial Hospital and the chief surgical director. She was Mrs. Cavalier's attending physician when she was first admitted," Dr. Sterling introduced as they reached Julia's hospital room door. "I know Dr. Everly Hawthorne. Nice to meet you in person, Doctor," the officer replied. Aria nodded in acknowledgement. "Likewise, Detective," Aria replied. "What happened to her?" Aria inquired out of formality as they entered the room. Julia lay unconscious, looking worse than when Aria had last seen her. Despite her anger towards the woman, Aria couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. "She got into a fight with another detainee. They were fighting over bed space. Can you believe that?" the officer explained. Aria's eyebrows furrowed upon realizing that Julia hadn't inflicted the injuries upon herself. Concerned, she picked up Julia's medical charts and reviewed her diagnosis. She noted that Dr. Sterling had performed a dilation and curettage procedure to remove the remaining tissues of her miscarriage from her womb. The cause of the miscarriage was listed as blunt force trauma to the stomach. Approaching Julia's bedside, Aria carefully examined her abdomen, observing the visible bruising and discoloration on her pale skin. The thought crossed her mind that Julia might have provoked the other detainee, or perhaps Ricky's men had somewhat gotten to her seeking revenge, but could they do that even within the confines of the police precinct? Aria felt someone's gaze on her and looked up to find a female police officer staring in her direction. The lady quickly averted her eyes once their gazes met, and another concern nagged at Aria. These law enforcement officers had gone after Julia at Nathaniel's behest, and she hoped they hadn't acted excessively in retaliation on his behalf. She decided she would have a talk with him about it when she returned home. She had been forced to leave amidst her homeschooling session for the twins, and had no choice but to let her boys close earlier than she'd wanted. Peeking into Nathaniel's gym room, she saw he was engrossed in an important phone call, judging by the cold, determined look on his face. She gestured to him that she would be right back and asked Mrs. Jonas to have Jake drive her to Evergreen Memorial Hospital. It wasn't until they arrived at the hospital that she broke the news about Julia to Jake. Seeing the darkening expression on his face, Aria knew Jake harbored no fondness for Julia. However, he remained silent. Aria joined Jake at the hospital reception. His tall, bulky frame was hard to miss. He didn't bother to sit down, but stood guard in a corner like a guardian angel. Spotting Aria, he quickly moved ahead of her as they strolled out of the hospital building together. "She lost the pregnancy, but she's fine," Aria informed Jake. "Uh-huh," he responded non-committally, then his phone rang. "It's the boss," he announced before answering the call. Aria wondered why Nathaniel was calling, her eyebrows furrowing as she listened to Jake's one-sided conversation. "We're still here, but we're just heading out," he said, then listened and added, "All right, boss," before ending the call. "Cavalier wants to use my phone to speak with Mrs. Julia. Could you please wait for me at the reception, madam?" Jake asked politely. Aria nodded in understanding, but was somewhat puzzled as to why Nathaniel was allowing Julia's husband to reach her through him. "I'll be in Dr. Rowan's office. I think it's best to give him an answer about when to resume work so he can plan his trip," Aria replied. Jake frowned as his eyes lowered to the swell of her stomach. Aria caught the look and rolled her eyes in exasperation. "I'm pregnant." "Not an invalid, Jake," she said, making him grin as she strolled back into the building. Julia's heart skipped a beat as Jake strode into her hospital room, her gaze instinctively trailing down his ruggedly handsome frame. He resembled Sean in build, but was a head taller, standing at about 6 feet 3 inches, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He exuded an air of commando-like presence, rarely ever smiling except for that one time when she had cornered him at a bar on one of his days off, way back when she'd first met Nathaniel. That encounter had been the result of sheer luck. All of Nathaniel's men had seemed unapproachable until Julia had spotted Jake entering a bar on the Upper East Side. Recognizing him immediately, she had followed him, hoping to enlist him as an insider. Despite her attempts at flirtation and buying him drinks, he had remained stoic and unapproachable until she had intentionally fallen across his lap, giggling like an idiot. "You won't let this go, will you?" he had said to her in a deflated yet sexy baritone, slightly slurred from alcohol intoxication. "I apologize, but I can't help but wonder, much like many other women in this bar, what a big guy like you might have to offer," she said with a suggestive smile, her eyes drifting down to his waist as she bit her lip. He responded with a grin, catching her off guard and causing her heart to skip a beat. She had done what she had not planned on doing. She had kissed him, and he had let her. Reflecting on it now, she acknowledged that she had let things get out of hand, knowing who he was while he remained unaware of her identity. Yet, she found herself enjoying their time together, culminating in an intimate encounter in the back of his Jeep. When he saw her again in Nathaniel's company, his cold, expressionless eyes had looked right through her. She had believed he still did not recognize her until she had tried to extract information about Nathaniel's parents from him, hoping for insider intel to win Nathaniel's affection. However, his gaze had met hers and he had said, "I suppose this was why you slept with me. I'm sorry. It would take much more than an easy lay to make me betray my boss," his tone dripping with condescension as he walked away. A profound sense of shame washed over her. "I'm to let you speak to Cavalier with my phone," Jake said as he approached her hospital bed, avoiding eye contact. Julia sensed the distance between them, the memories of their shared intimacy replaying in her mind, leaving her feeling terribly alone and despised. "Thank you, Jake," she murmured in a warm yet weary voice. Jake handed her his phone without making any physical contact and stepped back, the air thick with uncomfortable silence. "Are you just going to stand there and act like I'm some mannequin without saying a word to me?" Julia couldn't help but let bitterness seep into her tone. Jake remained silent, not even acknowledging that she had spoken. He stood there gazing into space as if he was some apparition, a mere figment of her imagination. The phone rang, and Julia drew a shaky breath as she answered it. "Julia?" Sean's familiar voice came through the phone. Julia began to sob. "Yes, baby," she replied in a barely audible whisper, her emotions rushing over her all at once. Sean sighed heavily. "What is this I hear about you trying to kidnap the Hawthorne twins? What is wrong with you?" Sean's words hit her like a ton of bricks, realization sinking in. If Sean was calling her through Jake's phone, and Jake said he was instructed to let Sean speak to her through his phone, it meant Sean must have spoken to Nathaniel. And if Nathaniel had shared details about the kidnapping, Ricky's abuse, and her pregnancy with Sean, it was game over for her. Earlier on, just as Kimura was about to continue speaking, the door to the gym was gingerly pushed open, and Aria peered in. She smiled at Nathaniel, her sweet, seductive beam immediately calming him. He stared at her, giving her a searching gaze, noting she had changed into a trouser suit that was both seductively timeless and elegant, which got him a tad distracted. Seeing that he was on the phone, she gestured and whispered, "I want to make a quick run to Evergreen Memorial Hospital. I'll be right back." Nathaniel wanted to protest, wanting to know what that was about, but she quickly added, "Jake will take me." And then she was gone. A quiet growl emitted from Nathaniel's throat. He didn't like her rushing off anywhere without a full security team. She was about 6 months pregnant, and God knows how many lunatics like Julia were out there, thinking they had some grievances to settle with the Hawthornes. Wondering if there was an update on Julia, he lowered his phone from his ear, paying half attention to what Sean was saying, and noticed a message from Captain received about an hour earlier, about the time he was chatting with Ethan and Alexander. With his attention drawn to the message notification, he read it, carefully noting the information about Julia's arrest, interrogation, and her transfer to Evergreen Memorial Hospital following a fight with another woman in the cell. He silently scoffed, then blinked as it dawned on him that this must be the reason Ariana had rushed to the hospital without prior warning. He worked his jaw in annoyance. Remembering Kimura was still on the line, he brought the phone back to his ear. "I know Julia screwed up majorly, but I believe you've had your pound of flesh. Her father died over this thing, Hawthorne. She lost everything and is trying to rebuild her life. I think it's rather excessive to send police to arrest her on her way to Los Angeles for a surprise visit." It wasn't as if she was skipping town. "We live in New York," Kimura was saying. A frown furrowed Nathaniel's eyebrows as he tried to understand the other man's perspective. "First off, I didn't just send the police after your wife, Kimura. She came into my home while my children were celebrating their birthday, trying to kidnap 2 4-year-olds because she wanted money to give Ricky." Nathaniel retorted with indignation. "What?" Sean exclaimed in obvious shock. Nathaniel paused, trying to discern if the other man was acting, as he continued in a string of expletives. "I'm guessing you didn't know?" Nathaniel inquired. "Mr. Hawthorne, I know to you I must be the scum of the earth. I mean, I did have an affair with Julia when she was engaged to you, but I swear—" Sean started to reply, but Nathaniel interrupted him. "Uh-huh. You forgot you also tried to help her kill my wife, my pregnant wife. Nathaniel's voice was ice cold and sarcastic as he enunciated each word. The other end of the line went quiet for a bit, and then Sean let out a sigh. I'm sorry for whatever part I played in that, and you can see we have more casualties. I mean, your men wasted a few of my cousin's men, and you did have Durham killed in prison. Sean said, my men acted in self-defense when they were confronted by your cousin's men. Their duty was to protect my wife. Contrary to your assumptions, we don't engage in senseless killing. I had no motive to harm Durham. In fact, I wanted him alive to face justice, Nathaniel asserted with restrained anger. So you didn't order the hit on Durham? Sean asked, appearing intrigued. I had assumed otherwise. He added as if pondering aloud. I'm just a man, Kimura. I don't go about playing God, Nathaniel replied. My apologies for the misunderstanding. I called to ask you to please let Julia go, Sean said. So she could, what? Come after my children again, or better still, try to devise a better plan to murder my woman, Kimura, Nathaniel retorted. I promise you, she will leave your family alone. Please, Mr. Hawthorne, let us give this vendetta a rest, Sean pleaded. Vendetta, Nathaniel repeated through gritted teeth. There was no vendetta. I only set the record straight with the Davies. Whatever that spiraled into was on them. You of all people should know better, Nathaniel replied. I know, Sean replied. Why are you not giving her the 50 million she needs to give Ricky? Nathaniel asked out of curiosity. I don't have that kind of money, Mr. Hawthorne, Sean replied. And am I supposed to believe that, Kimura? Nathaniel replied. An awkward silence followed, and then Sean let out a tired sigh and responded. I can't have that kind of money, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm trying to make an honest living. Asking my family for that kind of money will only set me back. I don't want that, Sean replied. Nathaniel responded, pondering the man's words and wondering if he was being sincere. But he decided it was not his concern. Twice now your wife has tried to hit me where it would hurt me the most. If I let her walk, and she tries it the third time, she will be 6 feet under before she can blink. That, Kimura, isn't a threat. It's a fucking promise, Nathaniel said. I promise you it won't happen again, Sean replied. And Nathaniel could denote that the man didn't like what he'd said, and he didn't give a damn. However, he acknowledged Kimura's attempt to make peace, despite having the capacity and resources to do the opposite. For his sake, Nathaniel decided to comply with his request. Fine, let's say I agree with you and let her walk. But it comes with conditions, Nathaniel clarified firmly. Firstly, you need to get your damn wife under control. I'll have the police hand her to you. So if she dares to come after my family again, I won't just be having an issue with her. You and my family will be at war, he warned. Sean let out a sigh. I understand, he replied. You will not regret this, and I truly appreciate you doing this. Before Nathaniel could end the call, Sean quickly added, one more thing, please. Can I speak to Julia through one of the officers at the precinct? She is not with her phone, he requested. She is not at the precinct. She is at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, Nathaniel informed him. A hospital? Why? Sean's voice instantly changed, sounding cold and menacing. I heard she had a fight with another detainee, Nathaniel relayed. Damn it! Sean cursed and then added, is she wounded? His voice was low and tense. I don't know, you are going to have to ask her yourself, Nathaniel stated. Isn't Evergreen Memorial Hospital where your wife worked several years ago? Sean asked. Yes, so? Nathaniel replied with a suspicious undertone. I was just wondering if I could speak to Julia through her or a former colleague, Sean suggested. I'll appreciate it if we keep my wife out of this, Nathaniel snapped defensively. Of course, Sean immediately replied. One of my men is at Evergreen Memorial Hospital right now. You can speak to your wife via his phone, Nathaniel informed him. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I will not forget your kindness, Sean acknowledged. Back at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, Julia was keenly aware that Jake stood nearby, listening to her conversation with Sean. Not only was she ill-prepared for Sean's line of questioning, but Jake's presence also made her uncomfortable. She couldn't possibly fabricate a lie with Jake present. He was a first-hand witness to her ordeal and would easily detect any lies. I can't talk right now, Julia responded to Sean's question. She figured he must have detected her discomfort in her voice because he asked, Do you have officers there? His accusatory tone shifted to concern. "Yeah," Julia replied. Sean let out a sigh. "Are you hurt?" Sean asked with concern. "Yes," she replied simply. "What happened?" Sean asked, his voice filled with frustration and concern. "Did any of them manhandle you, Julia? Give me a fucking name." Sean's voice was a low, angry growl. "I will tell you all about it later, darling," Julia replied. Sean sighed. "I'm coming home, and you and I need to have a serious talk," Sean said, "but I am in police custody." "I'm going to need a lawyer," Julia said cautiously. "Don't worry about that. Hawthorne is letting you go. I will pick you up at the hospital myself." "One of his conditions," Sean said. A worried frown creased Julia's brow, but she couldn't fail to notice that Sean was still being loving and warm with her, which meant he was either terribly forgiving or Nathaniel had not disclosed everything to him yet. Okay, I can't wait," she replied hesitantly. "Take care of yourself, please." "I will see you tomorrow," Sean said. "Thank you, darling," Julia replied. "Love you, baby," Sean said. Julia paused to glance awkwardly at Jake before replying, "I love you too." After the phone call, she gingerly offered the phone back to Jake. He simply accepted it without acknowledging her gratitude and headed for the exit. "Jake," Julia called, causing him to halt his strides, but he didn't turn to look at her. I'm sorry I tried to use you, back then. I needed leverage." "I'm sorry," she started to say, but Jake turned to look at her, meeting her gaze. "You are sorry for trying to use me? That's all you are sorry for?" Jake inquired with an arched eyebrow. "I figured it would seem hypocritical to apologize for our one-night stand when I don't regret that part," Julia replied, watching Jake's eyebrows furrow. "I enjoyed the sex with you, Jake. There's no point lying about it. I'm certain you already know that. I mean, we did it 7 times. But I am sorry that I tried to use you. That was low. I'm sorry," she said, giving him a searching gaze. "Did you enjoy the sex with Mr. Hawthorne as well? And Sean and every other man you go after for your selfish agenda?" Jake asked, folding his strong arms against his chest, standing with his powerful legs apart, and giving her his undivided attention. "There's no need to be a jerk, Jake. I was trying to apologize and aiming for a clean slate," Julia retorted. Jake replied, and took a few steps to stand by the foot of her bed. "Do you know why all these powerful men choose to be with you, Mrs. Cavalier?" Jake said, using her married name as an insult. Julia glared at him. "It's because they see something in you that sadly you don't see." He leaned forward and added, "You are beautiful, smart, although you lack a certain level of intelligence, but still you are a formidable force. You do not need these men to be somebody. You do not need to be Mrs. Anybody to be protected. You can do that yourself only if you can sit still for a minute and think instead of taking your clothes off to feel worthy," Jake said. "How dare you," Julia growled in annoyance, tears welling in her eyes. "Truth is like smoke. No matter how long and how hard you hold it in, it will eventually find a space to escape, and the stench is impossible to conceal. Tell your husband what happened to you. Give him a chance to be man enough to protect your honor, if you still have any left. If he walks, let him. If he stays, at least you would know just how much he cares. Continue to hide this, and one day he will smell the smoke. By then, for your sake, pray you can run fast enough, because for some reason you think you are smart enough to fool a man that comes from an organized crime family. You are playing with fire. Kimura is not Nathaniel Hawthorne," he said, heading to the door. "So, you think I should confess to Sean that I had a deal with Ricky to help me eliminate Durham, Sean's cousin, because the guy was planning on making me a prostitute to pay for his men that you and your commando friends killed and the businesses your beloved boss ruined?" "I don't know, Jake. That sounds like suicide to me." "Hard pass," Julia replied, her voice tinged with hopelessness and bitterness. Jake turned around to face her again, his eyebrows pulled together in a frown. "Did Kimura know about his cousin's plans?" Jake asked. "Yes," Julia replied. "And you think he would just let Durham turn his girlfriend into a hooker? You see what I mean by your level of intelligence, or have you still not grasped just who Sean Kimura, aka Cavalier, is? Do you know why he left his family business? What he's forcing himself to atone for, and yet still going back and forth to ask for favors from his family when he needs them?" Jake replied with a pitying stare, causing Julia's heart to race with fear. "And what makes you think he doesn't already know what you and Ricky did?" Jake added, Julia couldn't find words. He must care for you, though. At least he's making deals with the boss on your behalf. He's always been a great mediator. The problem was his anger and sense of retribution. Tell him, Julia. That's my advice. Take it or trash it. It doesn't matter, Jake said. Oh, yeah? Don't think I didn't notice you were upset at the thought of Ricky raping me. Julia threw back at him out of fear. Jake silently worked his jaw. I would be upset to hear of any woman being violated, Mrs. Cavalier, Jake replied and reached for the doorknob. But before he pulled the door open, he added, and I agree with you. I also don't regret the sex, then left. Julia felt a strange sensation as the door clicked shut after Jake left. It sounded ominous, as if it meant something, a warning. She couldn't quite understand why she still sensed a connection between them, and now foreboding, or perhaps it was just his remarks about her and Sean that stirred up this mix of emotions. Idiot, she muttered under her breath nonetheless. His usual arrogance and demeanor irritated her. Reflecting on his aloof carriage of no care in the world, perhaps it especially bothered her because all of Nathaniel's men carried themselves with that annoying air of superiority, as if they were invincible. Jake, Charles, Aidan, and Andrew were the worst. After her one-night stand with Jake and his subsequent rudeness, she found herself disliking him the most out of the rest of Nathaniel's guards. Or maybe the emotion he stirred in her wasn't dislike, perhaps it was hurt. Maybe his actions had affected her more deeply than she wanted to admit. Please, she muttered to herself, rolling her eyes and trying to shake off the unease and discomfort gnawing at her very soul, redirecting her attention to what Jake had revealed about Sean. Julia had never truly questioned Sean's past before because it hadn't seemed important. And it hadn't mattered because she hadn't taken their relationship seriously until Nathaniel disrupted her plans and ruined everything. And then there were her father's mistakes too. She sighed heavily. Due to her desperation to escape the corner Nathaniel had trapped her in, Julia wondered if she had made an error in judgment by accepting Sean at face value. Fully aware of who Nathaniel's men were now, she recalled it was Sean who warned her about them. He had spoken about their individual expertise almost as if he had detailed records and knew what they were capable of. At the time, she hadn't given it much thought. Sean was just a fashion photographer to her, the charming and well-mannered professional everyone admired. The suggestion that he could be someone dangerous, as Jake had hinted, terrified her. Julia took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. But perhaps she was overthinking. Maybe Jake had deliberately said those things to confuse and scare her. She suspected that Jake, with his intense reaction when she accused Ricky of assaulting her, might have feelings for her and could even be jealous of Sean. Dismissing the very notion that Sean could be a danger to her, Julia scoffed dismissively as she shut her eyes, determined not to let Jake get into her head. Meanwhile, Aria sat across from Dr. Sebastian Rowan in his office, the two discussing Rowan's upcoming leave of absence. I'm sorry the hospital can't afford to give you a whole year for your humanitarian vacation this time, she said apologetically, gesturing at her stomach. Dr. Rowan chuckled. It's okay, I can forego 8 months for my boss to have a baby, he replied. Aria rolled her eyes, eliciting another chuckle from him. I promise we will make it up to you, she assured him. It's okay, Aria, I don't mind, Dr. Rowan reassured. I should be here when you have your baby anyway, he added with a smile. Thank you, Aria replied. Dr. Rowan nodded in acknowledgement. This takes me back to my very first day here when you had to travel and call me in for my internship interview. Aria teased, eliciting a chuckle from Rowan. Yeah, reminds me I'm getting pretty ancient, Dr. Rowan replied with a smirk, prompting another chuckle from Aria. I have to ask, why do you do this? Take a year off to travel to remote areas and offer free services. Aside from being a saint, of course. Aria inquired, adding with a laugh. Nah, I'm no saint. I just love the idea of giving back and having an adventure at the same time. I mean, I have all this money and it's just me. So why not help those in need periodically and then return to our regular routine lifestyle as medical practitioners? He replied, his tone reflective. Aria tilted her head slightly, eyebrows furrowing in contemplation. I don't know. Still sounds saintly to me. Dr. Rowan smiled warmly, a hint of longing in his blue eyes. "You always have this knack for surprising and intriguing me. You're a phenomenal being, Dr. Everly Hawthorne. It'll be wonderful to work alongside you again," he said. Returning his smile, Aria said, "I could say the same about you. I learned from the very best. You taught me to believe in my gut feelings and go with them. And your confidence in me was terrifying, but it made me who I am today. I'm grateful for you." Dr. Rowan stood up, making a dramatic bow, causing Aria to giggle. "Don't be a stranger, though, or I might confidently kill someone before you get back," she joked. Rowan burst into laughter. "You're unbelievably talented, and yet you continue to doubt what you know. What we all know. I'm going to recommend you have a few sessions with Dr. Jordan to try to get to the root of that," he said, slipping his hands into his trouser pockets. Aria gasped in horror and quickly made her way to the door. "That's my cue to run," she replied over her shoulder. Rowan laughed. "He might help," he replied. "No, thank you," Aria shot back. Dr. Jordan was the hospital psychiatrist, and Aria was certain the older man was about 100 years old, with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to see through every soul. His calm demeanor and intuitiveness gave her the jitters for some reason. Dr. Rowan laughed and then called out, "Hey!" Aria stopped upon reaching the door, pulling it open as she looked back at Rowan. "Welcome back," he added. Aria smiled warmly. "Thanks," she replied, nodding in acknowledgement. As she stepped outside, she noticed Jake was already waiting for her there. "Oh, so sorry to keep you waiting, Jake," she quickly said as she shut the door. "It's not a problem," Jake replied in his deep, booming voice. "How did it go?" she asked as they walked down the hallway toward the hospital reception. Jake shrugged. "As it should," he replied gingerly. Aria chuckled. "I always get the feeling that I make you guys uncomfortable when I make you talk," she remarked. Jake grinned. "It's, unusual," he said. Aria raised an eyebrow. "Don't think I don't know you all chat away with Nathan when you're alone with him," she retorted. "Well, that's because we've known him all his life, and he's like a little brother to us all," Jake replied. "A nice way of saying I'm an outsider," Aria replied with a forlorn tone. Jake's eyebrows furrowed in obvious concern, but Aria burst out laughing. "I got you there. Serves you right. I still have a bone to pick with you and Andrew for throwing me to the sharks at that board meeting at Farmer Hawthorne," she said. "You're still mad about that," Jake replied, a gentle tweak at the corner of his lips. "Oh, I'm going to get the two of you and Tom one way or another, big guy," Aria promised in a dark, retributive tone, making Jake burst out laughing. A few minutes later, Jake parked the Jeep in front of the Hawthornes' mansion and hurried out to open the back door for Aria. "Thank you, Jake," Aria said. Jake made a slight bow in acknowledgement. With quick steps, she ascended the porch stairs and entered the foyer. Finding Nathaniel and the boys was easy. She simply followed the excited chatter to the boys' room. Nathaniel glanced up from where he sat on the floor with the boys, assembling a robotic toy. "Mummy, look what Dad got us for our birthday," Liam exclaimed, hurrying over to show her the robot's head. "It's a Robo-Ranger that can do cool stuff. It's like our own personal sidekick from that animation series, Tech Rangers," Owen explained enthusiastically. "It looks really cool," Aria replied, offering a warm smile. "Yeah, Mom," Liam chimed in. "It is cool. Dad got one for me and one for Liam," Owen affirmed, looking pleased. "I hope you remember to say thank you to Daddy," Aria reminded them. "Yes, we did, Mom," Owen replied, casting a glance at Nathaniel for confirmation. Nathaniel smiled. "Yes, son," he affirmed. "Welcome back, love," he added, his gaze lingering on Aria as the boys returned to helping him with the robot. "Thanks, baby," Aria responded, returning his smile. "Are you okay?" Nathaniel inquired, his gaze searching hers. Aria nodded with a smile. "Let me wash up. I'll be right back," she assured him. When she returned, Nathaniel was helping the children program their Robo-Ranger. "What do you want your default language to be?" Nathaniel asked. "Can we choose 4 languages for a start, Daddy?" Liam replied. "Yes, we can. It says here you can prompt a language change by saying hello in the language of choice," Nathaniel explained, showing the boys the information on the tablet and pressing the setting key on the robot's digital panel embedded at the back of the 4-foot-tall robot. Liam and Owen exchanged grins. Aria didn't want to intrude. She stood by the doorframe, watching the 3 engrossed in their task with intent concentration. "Preferred topic selection?" Nathaniel asked. Science and tech, Owen said. And video games, Liam chimed in. Owen nodded in agreement. Okay, here you go and have fun, Nathaniel prompted, standing up and offering each of the boys a control panel for their robots. Thanks, Dad, Liam said with a grin. We promise to be responsible with it, Owen added. I know you will. I trust you, Nathaniel affirmed. Most importantly, make sure it doesn't go rogue and decide to take over the world. Aria chimed in, making the boys laugh. Nathaniel joined Aria and reached for her hand, ushering her to their own room. Did you go to see Julia? Nathaniel inquired, although he already knew the answer. Yes, the hospital called me when she was brought in. She lost her baby, Aria supplied, holding his gaze. A frown furrowed Nathaniel's eyebrows. Was it that bad? He asked with a pensive undertone. Yes, I checked her stomach. She was badly beaten. I can just imagine the kind of blow to the stomach that could cause that much damage, Aria said. Nathaniel's frown deepened. What was the police explanation? Nathaniel inquired. They said she fought with a detainee over a bed space, Aria responded, and Nathaniel could detect the note of incredulity in her voice. You don't believe them? Nathaniel inquired. Do you believe Julia would go to that trouble while nursing a bullet wound? Aria asked with a skeptical undertone. Nathaniel shrugged. You did say she wasn't happy about the pregnancy, Nathaniel replied. Aria threw him an incredulous look. Do you know her to be a masochistic then? Aria threw back at him. Nathaniel looked away and started to pace. You think the police did that to her? Nathaniel asked in a pensive tone. I don't know, they might think to punish her on your behalf, Aria replied. Nathaniel stopped pacing to look into her eyes. No, Ariana, I'm not responsible for this, Nathaniel replied, noting her accusatory tone. Aria let out a sigh. Someone did that to her, Nathan. Under police custody. I don't think it's safe for her there, Aria said, her concern evident in her voice. Well, you don't need to worry. I've told the police I'm dropping the charges against her and to release her to her husband, Nathaniel replied. Do you think she's safe with him? Aria asked. Nathaniel framed her face with both of his hands, peering lovingly into her eyes. She married him, Ariana. If Ricky is responsible for the attack on Julia, then the only person who can protect her is her husband, Nathaniel said. I'm not so sure about that, Nathan, Aria replied. Why did you say that? Nathaniel asked with a puzzled frown. She doesn't want him finding out about the baby, which means she doesn't want him to know about Ricky's abuse. I don't get it, but for some reason, Julia is protecting Ricky from her husband, Aria explained. Nathaniel's gaze grew pensive. Sean's assumption that he had ordered Durham's death came to mind, and he wondered if Julia had been foolish enough to involve a rival gang to eliminate Kamora's cousin. If that was the case, then Aria was right. Julia was in hot water, and he hoped she was aware. Sometime in the night, back at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, Julia's eyes fluttered open. She couldn't quite discern what woke her, but then she saw two dark figures with face masks standing by her bedside on each side. Who are you? She managed to croak before one of the men pointed a gun at her temple. Good, you are awake, the one to her left said. Julia's heart lurched hard against the wall of her chest. Please don't kill me, she whispered in terror. Don't worry, we are not here to kill you, one of the masked men said. But you'll soon wish we had because of where you're headed, the other one added. His friend chuckled, a cold, humorless laugh. Julia let out a piercing cry, wanting to alert the security. But then a hard blow struck her head and darkness took her. The following morning at the Hawthornes' residence, Aria woke up to the warm feel of Nathaniel's naked body pressed against hers. A smile graced her lips at the protective manner in which he held her, enveloping her in his embrace, conveying a sense of deep love and cherished intimacy. One arm served as her pillow, encircling her chest, while the other lay gently over the swell of her stomach, a heart-warming gesture of affection. Good morning, my love. Nathaniel's deep, irresistibly sexy baritone resonated close to her ear as his hand slowly caressed her naked stomach. Good morning to you too, darling, Aria replied in a soft, tender voice. Did you sleep well? She added, feeling Nathaniel's arms tighten around her. Yeah, I did. I was waiting for you to wake up, he confessed. Aria's smile widened as she closed her eyes, reveling in his embrace. As she arched her back, pressing her soft behind against his waist, Nathaniel felt a delicious shiver course through his body. Waiting for me to wake up? Why? Aria asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. I thought you needed your rest, he began. Okay, Aria emphasized. But now that you're up, he continued, and Aria felt the arm around her chest shift. Nathaniel's hand moved from her stomach to cup her throat, while the other hand slid up to her chest. He gently tilted her head to meet his gaze, his eyes brimming with passionate intensity, causing her heart to race and her body to slowly melt at the sight of his shadowed face hovering over hers. Pressing his front firmly against her behind, he lowered his head and captured her lips in a fervent, hungry kiss. Aria felt herself turn to literal jelly in his strong arms, wondering if it was even possible to love and desire him more. I love you, Aria whispered against his lips. He grinned in response. Much later, Aria entered Nathaniel's gym room, eager to discuss her decision to return to work. She found him at the pull-up bar, his well-toned body glistening with sweat despite the cool room. She couldn't help but compare his current appearance to when she first re-entered his life. Much had changed except for the weekly blood samples they still took to monitor his condition, ensuring they were prepared for any sudden developments. Aria appreciated Dr. Williams's insistence on these precautions, despite Nathaniel's reluctance to be reminded of his ongoing health challenges. Aria had also noted Nathaniel's heart failure during his preconditioning and transplantation, though she hadn't discussed it with him directly. Instead, she had spoken with Dr. Williams, who assured her they were monitoring him for any signs of recurrence, though Nathaniel remained unaware. Hey, love, Nathaniel said when he noticed her standing there, looking at him with those eyes that often melt his heart and the adoring smile that makes him pinch himself sometimes, needing to know if he wasn't already dead and if this was his idea of heaven. Do you have a minute to talk? Aria asked. A frown furrowed his eyebrows. Yeah? Is everything okay? He asked as he immediately approached her. Aria chuckled softly and reached for his padded, glove-covered hands, drawing him to sit down with her on a workout bench. She started to say, Dr. Rowan needs a break for his humanitarian vacation and needs me to step in for him. Nathaniel's eyes grew dark with anger. Please hear me out, Aria implored, shifting her position to move closer to him. You are pregnant, Ariana. I don't... Nathaniel started to say, but stopped himself before finishing the statement. He had wanted to say, I don't want you working. But he realized that would come out poorly. Ariana was a doctor. It was a significant part of who she was. Saying something like that aloud would definitely cause a rift between them. However, he truly didn't want her working. He knew she wasn't the type to sit idle, especially when it was no longer necessary for her to be by his side all day, every day. Still, he preferred her close where he could ensure her well-being. If anything ever happened to her, he was certain it would be the end of him. For the same reason, he had put off discussing the twins resuming normal school now that things seemed stable. But he knew he couldn't keep his family locked away because of his fears. That wouldn't be fair. Sorry, I'm listening, he forced himself to enunciate. Aria gave him a searching gaze, then raised her left hand to cup his jaw, tenderly looking into his eyes. The hospital is just around 4 kilometers from here, darling. I'm confident I can manage it. Besides, I informed him that he's only allowed 4 months this time, since I'll be due in about 16 weeks, Aria stated. Nathaniel blinked at the news and inexplicably, his heart raced. They only had 16 weeks left before the baby arrived. Oh God, what if there's more than one baby? Are you all right? Did you hear me? Aria asked, bemused. Nathaniel nodded abruptly. How? How many months until the baby arrives? Nathaniel asked again, just to be certain he heard right, his gaze filled with anxiety. Aria chuckled as realization dawned. Drawing closer, she whispered, Don't worry, I've been through this before. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. I know, he said, attempting to maintain a tough facade, which only made Aria giggle. You're terrified, aren't you? She said knowingly. Nope, not at all. I've got this, he replied confidently. Aria laughed and Nathaniel raised an irritated eyebrow. Aria stretched up and pressed a kiss on his lips. Ready to find out the gender and how many are in there? She whispered against his lips. Nathaniel swallowed hard. It's, better we do so we can plan for their rooms, he croaked. Aria nodded, grinning. You've got this, baby. You're already a terrific dad. Aria whispered and kissed him again. You think so? I mean, I've got my job cut out for me with the twins you've already raised into proper gentlemen, he replied, giving a self-conscious smile. Are you kidding me? Do you know how jealous I sometimes get when they say Daddy is the coolest? She mimicked, making Nathaniel chuckle. He framed her face and kissed her soundly on the lips, drawing back only when she was breathless. Thank you, baby. And about you working, I want you to know that I will worry. I really worry a lot because I just want you safe. But you are Dr. Everly Hawthorne, and my heart chose you. I have to support you in everything that makes you, you. That's one of the reasons why I love you in the first place, right? He said, his eyes revealing his vulnerability. Aria felt tears pricking the back of her eyes. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and the wonderful children you gave me, Aria whispered with emotion. Nathaniel nodded and pulled her against his chest, holding her tightly. Thank you, baby, he whispered back into her hair. They stayed like that for about a minute, and then Aria said, Have you decided when the twins will resume school? Nathaniel let out a groan. Can we wait until they are like 6 years old? My God, they are so young. Aria shook with laughter. Let's talk about it when we return from the reunion, Aria inquired. Nathaniel let out a resigned sigh. Okay, I agree to talk about it, but I really want them to have a few more months to grow, baby, he replied. After their next birthday, then? Aria pressed. Fine. After their 5th birthday, he relented. Aria drew back and offered him her lips for a kiss. Nathaniel was about to kiss her when a knock sounded from the door, followed by a familiar, deep voice calling out to him, Boss? It was Andrew. When Aria made to draw back, looking deflated, Nathaniel cupped her by the sides of her neck and kissed her anyway. When he drew back and grinned at her, she let out a satisfied sigh. Nathaniel chuckled and pressed another kiss on the tip of her nose. Come in, Nathaniel called out as he got up from the bench, helping Aria up as well. When Andrew walked in, followed by Jake and Charles, their faces etched with seriousness, Nathaniel knew there was trouble. Madam, Andrew greeted, and the rest of the men echoed the greeting as Aria walked past them. Gentlemen, Aria replied as she headed out. However, she couldn't help but wonder what was going on, especially noticing Jake bowing his head and avoiding eye contact. For someone who always carried himself proudly with his head held high, that seemed pretty odd. Aria silently hoped that everything was fine. The men didn't say a word until Charles shut the door after Aria left. Nathaniel darted his eyes from one to the other, hating the suspense but understanding they didn't want his wife overhearing whatever they had to say. He held on to his temper. There's been an incident at Evergreen Memorial Hospital, boss, Andrew started to say in a low, controlled tone. Mrs. Cavalier is gone, he added. Nathaniel arched an eyebrow. Gone? What do you mean she's gone? He asked. She was taken, boss, and by the look of things, not by her husband. At least that's what it looks like, Andrew said as Jake stepped forward to show Nathaniel pictures of dead cops framing the doorway of Julia's hospital room. You've got to be kidding me, Nathaniel cursed, not quite believing his eyes. Do you know who did this? He asked in barely contained outrage. I got a call from one of the guys formerly working for Durham. Apparently, another Camorra took over Durham's men. He said he heard something about getting even with Mrs. Cavalier now that they know it wasn't you who had Durham killed, Andrew said. Nathaniel froze for about a minute as he held Andrew's unflinching gaze. You told me, boss, that Cavalier accused you of killing Durham and you refuted the claim. He either must have let it slip to one of his family and they concluded it must be his wife, or he is in on it, Andrew said. You really think he would do that? Nathaniel asked in an incredulous tone. I have it on good authority that he would do just about anything to keep his past buried, Andrew replied. He might also want to use it to start something with us. I mean, we were supposed to hand her over to him, Charles chimed in. I don't think he would be dumb enough to accuse me of anything. The police are in charge, after all, Nathaniel replied. Or it might be that Ricky got to her again, Jake said, drawing everyone's attention. What do you mean by got to her again? Nathaniel asked, giving him his full attention. I think Ricky's got someone at the precinct in his pocket. I'm guessing that's how they were able to get to Mrs. Cavalier at the precinct. Dr. Hawthorne mentioned Mrs. Cavalier seemed to be protecting Ricky from Camorra. I think it's only logical to think she used him to take out Durham and he is blackmailing her. Jake lied, not wanting to admit that Julia told him herself. Or maybe she was either taken by Ricky's men, since they share a common secret and she still owes him money, or Sean blabbed and put his wife in danger. Nathaniel mused aloud. Why aren't we thinking Ricky could rat her out? Charles said, making Jake throw him a pensive look. He is still mad at her. She did try to kill him, and he must know if she'd tell on him, the Camorras would come after him, so what's stopping him from selling her out, exonerating himself and making her a target? We all know Durham's side of the family would want retribution, and may have done this quietly to avoid Cavalier's wrath, Charles said. This is crazy. Should we call Cavalier? Nathaniel inquired. Captain already did, Andrew replied. We just have to wait to see how he responds, Andrew said. Nathaniel began to pace. He understood what Andrew meant by waiting for Camorra to make the next move, but Nathaniel didn't like the advantage it might give him, and if Ricky was responsible for kidnapping Julia, he didn't like the fact that he thought he could kill cops and take a woman who, albeit temporarily, was under his protection. He also hated that Ricky had gotten to Julia while she was in police custody and made Aria think he might be the one behind it all. Sure, he wanted Julia to suffer for daring to come after his loved ones, but he also hated the thought that people think they could just walk into Evergreen Memorial Hospital and cause mayhem with no repercussions. When he stopped pacing, his eyes settled on Jake. The other man was carefully studying him, as if he could read the workings of his brain. I once told my wife the Hawthornes are not at the mafia level yet, but it irks me to think that any criminal could believe they can walk into my wife's establishment, take a woman under my protection, kill cops, and get away with it, Nathaniel said, and then added, Find her, Jake, find Julia. She will tell us who did this, and then they will be my example. I don't give a damn if it's Camorra. They can't get away with this. Nathaniel perched on the edge of his desk, folding his now toned arms against his impressive pectorals. Evergreen Memorial Hospital seemed like a security risk, particularly troubling with Aria's decision to resume work there. Concerned about the security breaches, he felt they needed to do something about it. First, it was Ricky's men infiltrating the building, threatening to blow it up. Then, Julia left the hospital without anyone stopping her, just like the time Tom Hill did. Now, Julia was kidnapped, despite police guards stationed at her hospital entrance. The hospital clearly lacks adequate security. Andrew, ensure Jake has everything he needs. I want to gather intel before we head to Hawaii for the Harvard reunion. Yes, boss, Andrew replied. Should we inform the captain I'm on the case? Jake inquired. Charles chuckled, and Nathaniel met Jake's gaze. Don't go get yourself killed, and only resort to force if it's self-defense, Nathaniel cautioned knowingly. Andrew snickered, earning a glance from Jake. Before Nathaniel could continue, his phone rang. Seeing it was the police, he answered promptly, putting the phone in speaker mode. Captain, Nathaniel greeted, I assume you're aware of the situation with my men? The older man inquired, with a tinge of anger. Yes, and I'm so sorry. If there's anything we can do, please let me know, Nathaniel replied. Have you gotten a lead on the people responsible? The other man let out an exasperated sigh. The hospital cameras were tampered with. We've got nothing. I was hoping you could give us something. Who do you think might be behind this? The older man inquired. Camorra, Ricky and Durham's men, Nathaniel replied. Camorra, Ricky and Durham's men? My goodness, these are organized crime lords. And you suspect her husband too? The man exclaimed in surprise. Why? What are you not telling me? I thought Durham was working with Davies and was Camorra's cousin. He added with concern. Yes, I don't know why, but we have it on good authority that Julia was protecting Ricky from Camorra, and it has to do with Durham's death, Nathaniel explained. Oh, Christ, I was truly looking forward to retiring in peace. This is bad, the older man said with worry. I will let my men know, he continued, but Nathaniel cut him short. I really don't think that's a good idea, Captain, Nathaniel interjected. A heavy silence ensued. Please don't tell me I have moles in my precinct, he said with a tired groan. I suppose you also believed the fight for bed space story, Nathaniel quipped. Captain groaned as if in pain. Thanks for the heads up, I will handle this discreetly, the older man said, his voice slightly muffled from the other end of the phone. One more thing, Nathaniel began, pausing to meet and hold Jake's gaze. I've asked Jake to go after Julia. He thought to let you know in case your boys come across him, Nathaniel said. Jake, the older man repeated with subtle disbelief. Charles coughed to hide a laugh. Jake let out a sigh. Andrew chuckled. Yes, Nathaniel confirmed. Jake. The same Jake who threw a civilian out of the window after discovering the man was molesting his own daughter. The Jake we had to call SWAT to hold him down from beating a man to death after seeing how he'd battered his wife. The Jake Police Academy refused his application. That Jake? The older man asked in an incredulous tone. Nathaniel tried not to laugh. Yes, Captain, that Jake, he replied, hearing the man take in a controlled breath. Will Andrew be accompanying him? Captain inquired. No, Nathaniel responded. Then Aidan or Charles, the man pressed. No, Nathaniel replied, pinching the bridge of his nose. Nathaniel, I don't know if you still remember why Jake left the force, the older man started to say, but Nathaniel interrupted him, holding Jake's gaze. He's a changed man now. He knows his job is to find and bring Julia in so we can get to the root of this matter, and that is what he will do, Nathaniel said firmly. Jake nodded, lowering his gaze. Well, if you believe so, and come to think of it, I think they deserve to have Jake on their tail. If he needs to partner with my men, the captain began to say, but Nathaniel cut in again when Jake shook his head in refusal. It's optimal for him to operate solo. They'll anticipate police involvement, but not my interest, Nathaniel suggested. I must say that's a solid plan. Thank you, Nathaniel. Keep me updated, and if you come across any valuable intel, please inform us, he urged. Of course, Nathaniel affirmed before ending the call. Do you really want us feeding them information, boss? Especially knowing they have a mole, Jake inquired. No, we need to appear cooperative. Let them be a diversion while you work discreetly, Nathaniel explained. Understood, boss, Jake said, evidently satisfied with the response, then left with Charles. We haven't informed Dr. Everly Hawthorne yet, boss. Should I go tell her? Andrew queried. No, thanks. I will tell her, Nathaniel asserted. Andrew nodded and followed Charles and Jake outside. Exiting the gym room, Andrew let out a relieved sigh. He had hoped Nathaniel would intervene because he could sense Jake's unease. He somewhat knew that if Nathaniel had chosen not to intervene, Jake would have gone looking for Julia Davies regardless, and Andrew was a tad worried of what that might lead to. Jake had confided in him, Charles and Aidan, about his one-night encounter with Julia Davies, but at the time, he hadn't known she was after Nathaniel Hawthorne. He'd thought she was just a bored, rich socialite desperate for a good time. They'd all teased him about it, knowing how Jake shied away from any form of entanglement for fear of commitment. Jake had come from a dirt-poor background with a deadbeat father who enjoyed alcohol a little too much and took pleasure in battering Jake's mother. Jake had to endure the abuse throughout his teenage years, and when he grew bold enough to confront his old man, he beat him to within an inch of his life. Jake had joined the Navy SEALs at the age of 18, and each time there was a dangerous combat situation, he was always in the lead. He fought like a man possessed and dealt severely with any criminal who was especially cruel to children and women, earning him the nickname the Punisher. Andrew knew Jake had been hurt by Julia's machinations, even though he'd refused to admit to it. What he had thought was just an innocent encounter had turned ugly, and Jake hated it. When Nathaniel got engaged to Julia, Jake had gotten drunk and went to bed early. Andrew had been worried that Nathaniel would fall victim to Julia's machinations, and that Jake may have developed feelings for their boss's woman. But the following day after Nathaniel and Julia's engagement, Jake had carried on as if nothing had changed. Andrew was especially happy when he found out that Nathaniel wasn't fooled one bit about Julia. He just thought her to be a candidate for the job of performing the duties of Mrs. Hawthorne. But Andrew was relieved when Dr. Everly showed up. He knew it was only a matter of time before Julia was kicked to the curb. But now and then, he noticed how especially cold Jake was with Julia whenever they had an encounter. And he was worried he might have worked his feelings into hatred for the woman who might eventually be their boss's wife. Andrew felt a wave of relief when Nathaniel married Dr. Everly, grateful that Julia would finally be out of their lives for good. But then, at Julia's studio office when they'd seen Julia all bloodied and ravaged, Andrew saw Jake pause his strides, as if forcing himself mentally to stay in character and not lose his head. Andrew knew Nathaniel was no fool. Nathaniel could have picked Charles, Aidan, or any of the other men to go after Julia, but chose Jake. Andrew suspected that his boss may also have noticed that there was a bond between Jake and Davies. Although Nathaniel shared almost everything with him, he hadn't mentioned his suspicions regarding Jake, but Andrew had a gut feeling that Nathaniel knew. Andrew wondered if this was a test, or Nathaniel was giving Jake a chance for closure or something more. Andrew knew Jake to be a ruthless fighter, someone who put all his weight into every single punch. And for someone who weighed close to 260 pounds and stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and trained most of his life to kill. Whoever had Julia had no idea what was coming for them. And the captain was right. They would deserve it. Meanwhile, Julia woke up feeling disoriented and groggy, her head pounding as if it was about to explode. She managed to blink, trying to come to grips with her surroundings. Attempting to move, she realized she was tied up, her hands and ankles bound as she lay at the back of a moving car. In front of her were 2 men, one driving, the other in the passenger seat. Both had discarded their masks, and the man on the phone addressed someone named Victor, inquiring about the cargo plane's readiness. No worries. Ahmed is to join us in Luminara Isle. That's where the auction is taking place, the man said. Oh yeah? Well, we are quite close to our ride. It's too late for them to catch up. Before tomorrow evening, there wouldn't even be a trace of her left, he continued. The driver chuckled, and Julia's heart raced with fear. She could hear the frantic beating of it in her ears as she closed her eyes. It's a pity such a beauty would be wasted on those savages, remarked the driver. Yeah, well, we can't have people thinking they could walk all over us, her included, replied the man in the passenger seat as he ended the call. What was Victor saying? The driver asked. The police are on a mad hunt, the other one supplied. I told you shouldn't have killed those cops, the driver admonished. How else were we supposed to get inside the room, dumbass, the other one retorted. Let's just hope we get out of here before they catch up, the driver said. I'm telling you, we are out already, the one in the passenger seat snapped. From where Julia lay, she could see the tail of a plane and figured they were either at a helipad or an airport. Panic set in. If they succeed in taking her out of the state, that might be the end for her. She knew she was the one they were talking about, the one who would disappear without a trace. Although she had no idea what auction they were talking about and prayed it was not what she was imagining. With no idea who these men were, and no way to call for help, there was nothing she could do but wait. Perhaps she might get the chance to escape or call for help, or perhaps this might be how it would all end for her. Tears pricked the back of her eyes. Strangely, Jake's taunts echoed in her head, making her lips tremble with despair. Please, please help me, God. I promise you I will change. Please help me, she silently prayed, even though she knew her situation was dire. When the car came to a stop, Julia feigned unconsciousness. The men hoisted her out and onto a cargo plane, where they deposited her in a corner, onto a sleeping bag. One of them nudged her with his foot, treating her like a dog. Drawing a practiced breath, she blocked out her reality, seeking refuge in a happy place to shield herself from the unfolding horror. For a fleeting moment, her mind went blank, her heart pounding loudly, a glimmer of hope still flickering within. However, she struggled to conjure a happy thought. As the plane began to move, tears welled in her eyes, streaming down her face. Throughout her adult life, she had sought escape from the fear of loneliness and poverty in the arms of men, yet none of them had brought her happiness or peace. Taking a deep breath, ready to succumb to her fate, Jake's rare smile bloomed in her head, and she relived the night they shared, its innocence and spontaneity, making her heart swell with emotions. Julia's body shook as she cried silently. Andrew joined Charles and Jake in the elevator. The 3 men stood side by side in silence for a few seconds until Charles broke the silence. How are you holding up, buddy? He asked, glancing at Jake. Jake returned his searching gaze and gave him a curt nod. I just have to find her, then maybe I can stop feeling guilty, Jake replied. Guilty? Why? Andrew asked, his gaze mirroring Charles's quizzical expression as they both turned their full attention to Jake. I knew they would come for her. She was a loose end for both sides. I wanted to go back to the hospital after I brought Dr. Hawthorne back home. But I just didn't want to get involved, man. I don't even understand this feeling, Jake admitted, his tone tinged with vulnerability and sincerity. Andrew knew that Jake was always reluctant to open up about his emotions, and the rawness in his voice now tugged at his heart. You're an ex-serviceman, Jake. We've been programmed to protect civilians, and you did that for the better part of your life, putting your heart and soul into it. Plus, you know her on a personal level. Of course, you feel responsible. But you must know that none of this is your fault. She was ambitious and she took it too far. Let's hope she gets a second chance. Okay, Charles said, offering Jake a friendly pat on the back. And if you need backup at any point, you know what to do, Andrew added. We'll join you with bells on. We'll even bring Aiden. You know he's a lunatic, Charles added, eliciting chuckles from Jake and Andrew. Thanks, guys. You're the best brothers anyone could ever ask for, Jake replied, then let out a deep sigh. So where do I start? He asked Andrew. The guy who called me is named Antos. Let's head to your room and give him a call while you pack, Andrew replied. Great, Jake said, staring blankly into space, hoping he wasn't already too late. Meanwhile, Nathaniel leaves the gym room in search of Aria. He found her in their room, getting ready to go out. The adjoining door to the boys' room was open, but there was no sign of them. With furrowed brows, he asked, Where are the boys? Aria turned towards Nathaniel as she picked up a blue-black jacket to wear over her form-fitted dress. She gathered her hair into a bun atop her head, revealing her lovely face bare of makeup, except for a subtle shine of pink lip gloss, highlighting her lush lips. They're with my aunt and Anita, she replied, giving him a searching gaze. I'm surprised your friend hasn't mentioned going back to Sylvan Ridge. She must really enjoy being with the twins, Nathaniel remarked. As she always reminds me, I've already paid her, and whether she's here or there, she's still working for me. Besides, I think she's considering staying permanently. The other day, she asked if I might need an assistant at Evergreen Memorial Hospital. Aria replied, with a knowing smile. I think she's planning ahead for when the twins start regular school, she added. Okay, and you don't think it has anything to do with her dating Andrew? Nathaniel asked, raising an eyebrow. Oh, I know that's part of it, but since she hasn't told me they're serious yet... Her voice trailed off as she made a zipping gesture across her lips. Nathaniel chuckled. But I hope Andrew doesn't get her hopes up and then hurt her. Then we'll have a problem, Aria said with a determined look, adopting a menacing stance that made Nathaniel chuckle. My little protective mother hen. They're both adults. It's best we don't get involved, Nathaniel advised. But she's my girl. And I protect my girl, she replied defiantly. Nathaniel chuckled and pressed a quick kiss on her lips. Reaching for her hand, Nathaniel guided her to the chest, at the foot of their massive bed, and gently seated her upon it. He then settled beside her, tracing circles in her palm with his index finger. Myself, Andrew, Charles, and Aiden will be accompanying you to Evergreen Memorial Hospital today, but you won't be staying there long. We'll make rounds with you and have a meeting with Rowan and the rest of the staff about the hospital's security. Nathaniel started to explain, observing as Aria's eyebrows furrowed in a puzzled frown, though she didn't interrupt him. We need to invest in top-notch security tech for the hospital, for your safety, the staff's safety, and the safety of your patients, he continued. What's wrong? You seem worried, Aria asked in a low, hesitant tone. Nathaniel raised one hand to frame the side of her face, gazing lovingly into her eyes. Earlier today, some miscreants entered Evergreen Memorial Hospital, killed 2 cops, and took Julia, Nathaniel explained. Aria inhaled sharply, and Nathaniel watched as she swallowed, her eyes darting as they met his gaze. Did they kill her? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her lips trembling and her hands growing sweaty. We hope not, my love. The police are on the case, and I am too. We'll do our best to find out who did this, he replied, his voice soft and soothing. Gosh, Aria said, feeling deflated. She has a gunshot wound, a severe blow to the stomach, badly battered. How will she survive this? Aria muttered, her emotions evident. I mean, she's a terrible person, but I had hoped she'd catch a break. What is her husband saying? Aria asked, scrutinizing him with an anxious gaze. Or has he not heard? Nathaniel frowned. Aria's question was valid. Andrew mentioned earlier that Captain had called Kimura. If he were in the other man's shoes, he would have called for information at least, or perhaps he didn't need it. There was something about Kimura's silence that bothered him. Nathaniel wondered what the other man might be up to. He has heard. The police called him. I assume he must be trying to find her too. The man has connections. I'm certain he must be utilizing them, Nathaniel replied, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. Aria interlaced her fingers with Nathaniel's and said, "Yesterday there was this female police officer who was giving me a strange vibe in Julia's room." The groove between Nathaniel's eyebrows deepened as he listened intently. "When I was examining Julia's stomach, I noticed she was looking at me in a weird, intense way. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. I tried not to make her feel uncomfortable or pay her any particular attention so as not to, spook her. But I have this gut feeling that she knows what happened to Julia in that cell," Aria said. "Did you catch her name? Was she wearing a name tag?" Nathaniel asked anxiously. "Amelia Steele," Aria replied. "I may be wrong, though. I wouldn't want to put anyone in trouble," she quickly added. "It's okay, baby. I'll just have someone have a talk with her," Nathaniel replied, pressing a quick kiss to her lips before hurrying back to his gym room to get his phone. He called Jake and said, "I have a name for you. Officer Amelia Steele. Find out what she knows." Aria thought she might be involved, Nathaniel's voice tinged with urgency. "On it, boss," Jake replied before ending the call. Nathaniel was contemplating whether to inform Captain when his phone rang, the caller ID showing an unknown number. Nathaniel picked it up. "Hello," he said into the phone. "You should have let your men watch her, Hawthorne. The police are freaking useless." Kimura growled into the phone. Kimura, I was wondering why it was taking you so long to call me," Nathaniel replied. "What the hell does that mean?" he retorted. "Cut the bullshit, Sean. You accused me of killing Durham. I told you it wasn't me. The next thing, 2 cops were dead and your wife disappeared." "What? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Nathaniel said in a calm, controlled tone. "And again, with your presumptions, I'm not the police. Julia was under arrest. It wasn't my place or my men's to guard her. And why the hell would I think she needed a guard, Sean?" "Is there something you would like to confess to?" Nathaniel fired back, making sure he sounded as unbothered as possible. "You think that I did this?" Sean replied after a hesitant silence. "Well, did you?" Nathaniel threw back at him. "She is my wife." He snapped back in anger. "Then I expect you to do what is necessary. She is your responsibility. You endangered her somehow, so fix it and lose my number," Nathaniel replied and ended the call. Seething in anger, hating being dragged into this nonsense with the crime syndicates, and hating more that the bastards are putting his woman in the line of fire, he picked up his phone and texted Jake saying, "If you discover that Kimura is involved in this somehow, you have my express permission to break his fucking jaw." Jake saw the text in his room, and a slow grin stretched across his lips. "What is it?" Andrew asked, curious, and got up from the study chair to join Jake, who was zipping up his backpack. Charles too joined the two, and they all looked down at the phone screen. "I think the dumb fuck just pissed the boss off," Jake said, chuckling. "Well, you know what that means," Charles added with a smirk. "He's all in," Andrew remarked, letting out a sigh. "I need to beef up security," he said as he headed to the door. Upon reaching it, he turned to Jake and said, "Give them hell." Meanwhile, Julia lay on the floor of the cargo plane, her eyes swollen from crying. They focused on ridges of tightly packed white substances arranged in about 8 rows across the width of the plane's interior. At the opposite end of her position, she noticed wooden boxes stacked 3 rows high, one left open, allowing a faint glow from the interior light to illuminate its contents. It was grenades. She released a shaky sigh, realizing the gravity of the situation. These men were involved in illegal substance trafficking and weapons smuggling. Julia still couldn't piece together who they were or who had sent them. only that it was payback for Durham's death, suggesting they were either Durham's or his father's men. She couldn't comprehend how they had discovered her involvement in Durham's demise, but Jake's mention of Sean knowing she was implicated troubled her deeply. Fresh tears threatened to spill as she refused to believe Sean would betray her, convinced of his genuine feelings for her. Yet, she pondered if this situation was beyond his control. If there were forces at play she hadn't grasped yet. With her eyes darting around the vast interior of the aircraft, she noticed 5 backpacks resembling parachutes. Her heart raced, briefly entertaining the notion of seizing one of the backpacks and bolting to the plane's tail, then leaping off, yet she quickly dismissed the idea as sheer madness. It would be suicidal. Even if, by some miracle, she managed to execute such a plan, she doubted her chances of survival. With no clue about their destination, they could be flying over the Atlantic for all she knew, becoming fish food before she even hit the water. And even if she miraculously landed on solid ground, she'd likely become prey for some wild animal. With 0 survival skills and a lifelong disdain for camping, Julia concluded that whether she awaited her fate or attempted a risky escape, she was essentially a sitting duck. For some bizarre reason, Jake's insult reverberated in her mind, echoing like tormenting whispers, attempting to tear down the walls she had erected to shield herself from emotional pain over the years, ever since she'd realized she had no one but herself to depend on. Those walls had kept her emotions detached from hurt, and now she was raw with the onslaught of it. Do you know why all these powerful men choose to be with you, Mrs. Cavalier? It's because they see something in you that sadly you don't see. You are beautiful, smart, although you lack a certain level of intelligence, but still you are a formidable force. You do not need these men to be somebody. You do not need to be Mrs. Anybody to be protected. You can do that yourself only if you can sit still for a minute and think instead of taking your clothes off to feel worthy. She envisioned Jake discovering her abduction and ultimately her fate, realizing for some inexplicable reason it mattered to her how her story concluded. She didn't want to vanish without a trace. She wanted him to know she fought, to hear that she died fighting. Her gaze returned to the parachute, fresh tears blurring her vision. I should probably get some rest. It's going to be a long ride, Julia heard one of the men say. We have to make a quick stop at Serena Isle for a drop-off before we head out, another voice interjected. You're right, it's going to be a long ride, and we have company for a party of 4, the man said, sounding like the brute in the passenger seat of the jeep that had brought her, the same brute who had knocked her out at the hospital. Laughter filled the enclosed space. I bet she must be a good ride, another voice chimed in. Julia's eyes settled once more on the parachutes, then slowly drifted to the grenades. Her side hurt from her existing wound, and her body ached from being curled up in the fetal position for hours. However, her feigned unconsciousness had prompted them to loosen her bounds. Soon enough, she felt the plane lurch, the sudden drop making her heart plummet in fear. The sound of the engine rising loudly, she carefully shifted her position, watching as the cargo hatch started to open. The men milled in her direction, starting to wheel the packed substances towards the rear. She watched as they waited by the cargo bay for the plane to get low enough before beginning to drop the large packages below. She had no idea if they were dropping them on land or water. The roar of the engine was deafening, but she figured if they were making a drop-off, there must be some form of habitation in the area. Her eyes went to the parachute again, noting that the men weren't going near the weapons stash. She assumed then that they intended to drop off the substances only. Her heart raced as she contemplated what she was imagining doing. What if she did succeed in getting as far as jumping and landed in the den of more savages? Her eyes went to the grenades again when the 3 men came for the 3rd trip, wheeling more packed substances to the bay. Julia gingerly reached for one of the hung jackets to wear. Quickly darting to the grenades, she pocketed a few, then she reached for the parachute and quickly hung it over her shoulders. She was about to secure the waist strap around her waist when the man turned and saw her. One immediately took out his gun and aimed it at her. Julia was shaking badly, but she managed to take out one of the grenades, making the man take a step back. Watch that, drop it, and we all die. You first, though. You will be blown to bits, the man who had been talking about raping her earlier said. She doubted she would ever forget that voice now. Julia shrugged. I don't know. Maybe it is better this way, she said. When the man cocked his gun to shoot her, she pulled out the grenade pin and threw it in the man's general direction before taking cover and succeeding in evading the fired shot. The men scattered, jumping for cover as an explosion rocked the plane, leaving a large gap in the side. Before they could recover, Julia threw another grenade behind her, just at the back of the packed substance row. Another explosion rocked the plane, and the smoke mixing with the burst substances filled the air. Julia pulled out another grenade, threw it at the one with the gun, and ran towards them, not bothering to stop to look at the damage she had made, or even if the men were alive or where they were or what was below. The plane pitched dangerously with a loud noise, blaring loudly in warning. Julia jumped. Looking below, she saw that they'd been throwing the packages into the water by the riverside, and the shore was filled with floating packages, with 3 other men pushing them to shore. Before she could hit the water, gunshots echoed around her, battering her parachute. She silently prayed she would at least make it out of the water before she died. Nathaniel and Aria entered Evergreen Memorial Hospital together, flanked by Andrew and Charles, with Aidan following close behind. Dr. Rowan stood waiting at the reception, dressed in a simple long-sleeve shirt and denim pants, catching Nathaniel's attention. Glancing at Aria, he noticed her deep in thought. Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne. Andrew, Dr. Rowan greeted them, acknowledging Charles and Aidan before turning to Aria. Good morning, Dr. Rowan. Quite a start to the day, isn't it? Aria replied. Rowan let out a sigh. Morning, Dr. Rowan, echoed Andrew, Charles and Aidan. Nathaniel simply nodded in response. Thanks to Andrew, we've managed to keep the news contained except for the police visiting the night staff. We've kept it quiet among the patients to prevent panic, Dr. Rowan explained. Thank you, Andrew, Aria said, turning to the tall man. Just doing my job, Dr. Hawthorne. You're welcome, Andrew replied. Where should we hold the meeting, Rowan? Nathaniel asked, intertwining his hand with Aria's. This way, please, Dr. Rowan urged, leading the team down the corridor to the hospital staff lodge. Good morning, Dr. Everly Hawthorne, and welcome back, the hospital matron greeted. Thank you, Aria responded, and for about 5 minutes, the hall buzzed with people exchanging pleasantries before settling down. The security team invited by Andrew for a presentation also joined them in the room. Over the next 20 minutes, they discussed the installation of CCTV cameras in strategic corners on each ward and hospital corridors, as well as the management of hospital security. It will be an extension of the Hawthorne security team, and we have a strong track record with the Hawthorne family to support our expertise, the spokesperson said. Dr. Rowan asked a few questions, and while the man responded, Aria felt the baby move in her stomach, getting a kick to her rib side from the right and a stretch of what seemed like a head to her left. She gasped softly in awe, and Nathaniel, standing behind her chair, heard and saw her immediately place one hand to the left of her stomach and another to her right. His eyebrows furrowed as he bent over to whisper close to her ear. Are you okay, baby? Nathaniel rasped, his concern evident in his voice. I felt the babies move, she whispered back in excitement. Babies? Nathaniel repeated, making her grin at him, her eyes brimming with tears. Yeah, she whispered. Following the meeting, Rowan guided the security team out of the lodge to acquaint them with the hospital layout. Meanwhile, Aria sought out the head of the gynecology team. Dr. Sterling, may I have a word? She requested. The other woman promptly approached, leaning in with a teasing smile. Everything all right? She asked, her tone playful. I think my husband and I are ready to learn the sex of our babies, Aria whispered back. Babies? The doctor echoed, then grinned when Aria nodded. Shall we? She offered, extending a hand to help Aria up. But Nathaniel intervened, stepping to the side of her chair. Please, allow me, he insisted, reaching for Aria's hand. A short while later, Aria found herself in the scan room, reclining on the examination bed with pillows supporting her head. Nathaniel stood by her left side, holding her hand as the doctor applied ultrasound gel to her stomach and carefully spread it with the transducer. Aria stole a glance at Nathaniel, noticing his eyes alternating between the scan screen and her stomach. He lifted her hand to his lips, planting a kiss on the back of it. Her heart swelled at the sight of his eyes brimming with emotions, bringing tears to her own eyes. Here they are. Well, congratulations, Dr. Everly Hawthorne. Congratulations to you as well, sir. It seems you were right, Doctor. Here we have 2 heartbeats and their genders. Specifically 2 boys, Dr. Sterling said playfully. I was hoping for at least 1 girl, Aria said, laughing through her tears. They're perfect, Nathaniel murmured, his voice low and deep. Even Dr. Sterling couldn't help but smile warmly at him. Nathaniel couldn't quite articulate his emotions at that moment. Overwhelming joy surged in his heart, mingled with an inexplicable fear. His family was expanding, his dream with Ariana was coming true, yet he couldn't shake the apprehension of losing it all. Aria extended her hands, inviting him in for a hug. Nathaniel embraced her tightly. I'm here this time, baby. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered into her ear, prompting her to release a shaky breath. Meanwhile, Jake waited outside the district precinct for Officer Amelia Steele, having received intel that she was still in the building. It took about 3 hours, late into the night, before she finally emerged and headed for her car. Jake observed her as she entered the vehicle, made a call, and spent about 10 minutes inside before starting the engine. Once she left the parking lot, Jake waited for a 2-minute head start before discreetly following her at a distance, relying on the tracker he had placed on her car. After an hour's drive, they arrived at Amelia's house in an upscale neighborhood, far more lavish than Jake had anticipated given her salary. He waited for her to park and enter her house before donning a ski mask, tucking a magnum into the back of his trousers, and checking his boot strap for his hunting knife. Exiting his Jeep, he approached the house, about 100 meters away, and quietly assessed the surroundings, checking for the presence of children, elderly individuals, or a husband. Soon enough, Jake heard voices emanating from inside the building. Based on the conversation, it appeared Officer Amelia Steele had a disabled child she was caring for. He bided his time until a woman he assumed was the nanny exited the building. She appeared to be in her 40s. When he could see through a window that Amelia was preparing for bed, he picked the lock at the back entrance and cautiously entered the building, following the sound of the woman humming to a laundry room. Upon entering the room, the woman was startled as she caught sight of Jake. Her gaze flickered at a baseball bat in the corner before she lunged for it. Acting instinctively, Jake delivered a mid-air kick to her side, causing her to collide hard against a nearby wall before crumpling to the floor with a loud groan. She took quick, shallow breaths as she attempted to move, desperately searching for a weapon to defend herself with. But Jake knew his kick had likely broken something, a fact confirmed when he seized her by the shoulder and lifted her up by the neck, eliciting wheezing protests as she struggled to break free. I'm tired, hungry, and in a bit of a hurry. Don't think to fuck with me or wasting my time, or this is going to get messy. I need 3 answers from you. Tell me where they are taking her, the name of the detainee that attacked her in her cell, and who you are working for, or I will kill your son and make you watch, Jake threatened, though it was a mere bluff, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears flowed down the woman's cheeks as she hoarsely pleaded, my son is innocent. To Jake, her plea was an admission of involvement. Don't make me ask you again, he growled in anger. At Luminara Isle, Julia stumbled out of the water, one eye unseeing and her head throbbing as though a bullet had pierced her skull. She struggled to comprehend how she could still move. Blinking, she realized blood from her temple had spilled into her eyes, momentarily blinding her. With trembling hands, she washed her eyes, relieved when her vision cleared. Yet blood continued to stream from the wound and she felt lightheaded. Despite this, she hurried into the dense bushes, running blindly into the dark woods, desperate to distance herself from the men still pursuing her. Mosquitoes swarmed around her, their bites causing her skin to itch uncontrollably. Ignoring the discomfort, she pressed on, unaware of her location or where her path led, driven only by the instinct to survive. As time blurred and disorientation set in, fear gripped her with a sense of despair. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to recall why she had leaped from the cargo plane. Eventually, the distant sounds of barking dogs and approaching footsteps echoed through the woods, sending a shiver of dread down her spine. She began to sob, knowing it was only a matter of time before they captured her. likely subjecting her to a fate worse than death. She quickened her pace, running as fast as she could muster, fighting off dizziness by shaking her head vigorously to stay alert. Suddenly, a loud gunshot echoed, startling her. She glanced back, lost her footing, and felt the ground collapse beneath her. With a scream, she plummeted into a deep ditch, landing with a sickening thud and breaking her ankle. Agony ripped through her, and she cried out in pain. Through the blinding tears, she saw dark figures looming at the edge of the ditch. One of them aimed a gun at her, while another shone a flashlight in her direction. "You're dead now, bitch!" one of them shouted. Taking a deep, quick breath, Julia noticed that half of the man's face was bandaged, along with his shoulder. It was the same man who had driven the jeep that transported her to the cargo plane. The other two were nowhere in sight. Julia wondered if they were dead, finding solace in the thought that she wouldn't die alone. "Get a rope! I need to be alone with this bitch!" he bellowed. Julia reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around a remaining grenade. She took a deep breath, resigned to her fate. She planned to wait for the man to enter the ditch before pulling the pin, taking him down with her. Fresh tears blurred her vision as she realized she wouldn't even have a proper burial. Surprisingly, a sense of calm enveloped her, freeing her from fear even as excruciating pain continued to ravage her body. She watched as the men tied a rope around the one designated to descend into the ditch and began lowering him down. Before long, the man landed at the bottom, angrily yanking off the rope from his shoulder, allowing it to fall to his waist. He advanced towards her. He then grabbed her by the collar of her jacket, pulling her up and eliciting cries of pain from her. "You killed my friends, blew up our plane, and wasted thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. I'm going to enjoy killing you," he growled, backhanding her across the face. Julia groaned in agony, her eyelashes fluttering as each blow sent her in and out of consciousness, blood once again clouding her vision. With trembling hands, she retrieved the grenade, flicked off the pin with her thumb, and locked eyes with her assailant. "Don't you just love it when people underestimate you?" Julia croaked, slipping the grenade into the man's jacket. He recoiled, denying her the chance to embrace him, and perished together. Frantically, he attempted to remove the grenade, but Julia watched as the rope tied around him prevented his escape. He was then yanked backward from her, and an explosion rocked the ditch, hurling her backward and causing her head to strike the ground. Julia took slow breaths, resigned to her fate. Blinking, she thought she heard someone else enter the ditch. A figure loomed over her, gathering her into a warm, familiar embrace. An elusive memory tugged at her mind, the scent of the male musk trying to coax it to the surface. "Stay with me, please. I've got you," the deep voice said with unexpected concern. "Jake?" Julia whispered, her voice weak and filled with despair. "Jake," she repeated, convinced she was hallucinating. She shut her eyes, surrendering to the encroaching darkness. Earlier on, back at Amelia Steele's residence, Jake binds her legs and ankles together, securing her against a sidewall before retrieving his phone to record the scene. "Go on. You have 1 minute," Jake instructed. "If I tell you, I am dead," she growled, fear and anguish evident in her voice. Jake sighed, pausing the recording. "Let me explain the difference between cooperating with me and doing the opposite," he said, crouching in front of her to meet her eye level. "I will torture you by harming your child until I get what I want. Then I'll ensure Ricky and the Kimura know that you implicated them. After that, I'll step outside and watch as they finish you off, along with your child. But if you help me, I'll leave quietly. Now what's your choice?" He brandished his knife, adding weight to his threat. "You have no idea what the Davies cost me. John Davies was scum. His daughter deserves what she got," she snarled, enduring the pain. "Okay, so this was personal for you. I understand, and I don't care." "You're wasting my time," Jake retorted. "You should understand the kind of family you're protecting. Her father peddled fake drugs, indifferent to the harm they caused. My son, who requires special medication, suffers greatly from the costs. Despite the Hawthornes offering more affordable drugs, they remain out of reach. John Davies provided alternatives, which we unknowingly bought only to find they were poison. It worsened my son's condition. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, nor could I disclose the drug source to the doctors. John operated a black market for his counterfeit drugs, deceiving and killing people. You know the saying, the enemy of my enemy. Amelia Steele confessed. So they approached you, and you agreed to give her up, resulting in the deaths of your own colleagues, Jake surmised, observing her anguished expression. That wasn't the plan. They were supposed to take her, and that's it, she fervently replied. Relax, I'm not here to judge. I'm here for answers, Jake reassured. So you're not bothered by the fact that Davies's drugs harmed and killed people? She growled. I care, but I don't believe in punishing a daughter for her father's crimes, Jake retorted. She's no saint, she insisted. True, but who gave you the authority to judge? For the last time, give me my answers, Jake demanded. It's probably too late anyway. Ricky's men arranged for an inmate to be brought in as a detainee. I don't know how they did it, but they did. Her name is Chucky. I heard they use her to get rid of loose ends, but this time they just wanted to send Davies a message to let her know to watch her back. But it turned out she was pregnant for Ricky. I felt a little bad for her being married to Sean Cavalier and getting impregnated by a rival. But of course, it's karma. I was surprised to hear from a man claiming to get my info from Ricky's men that they wanted to pick Julia Davies up to answer to a crime she committed. I didn't think Ricky would want her harmed after the news of her being pregnant for him, and I was right. I agreed to give them intel because I thought they were from Ricky. But after she was taken, I got a call from Ricky asking me who took her. I don't want to be involved in this. I only helped them because I thought they were just going to make her suffer a bit. That's it, she said. And then, Jake prompted. What? What do you mean? Amelia Steele stuttered. Come now, for a dirty cop like you, I'm certain you must have been a little curious as to what they intended to do to her. I doubt Ricky will just leave it at that, Jake said. The lady looked away before meeting his gaze again. A friend said they are headed to Luminara Isle, but will make a drop on the coastline of Mexico. Luminara Isle is, she began, but Jake interrupted her. I know where Luminara Isle is and what the place is known for, so they intend to sell her as a sex slave at an auction. Does that suit your level of retribution yet? I mean, since her losing her child didn't do it for you, he retorted. My son can never get out of the wheelchair he's trapped in because of her father. Forgive me if I'm not at liberty to feel sorry for her, she growled. Give me your friend's name. The one with the cargo plane details, Jake demanded. After a few tense seconds of silence, she provided the name. What are you going to do to me? Amelia Steele asked. Nothing. I gave you my word, didn't I? Now, what your colleagues decide to do is up to them, Jake said. She growled at him in anger. Jake ended the recording and knocked her out. Exiting the building a minute later, Jake sent the recording to Andrew, knowing he would know what to do with it. He then messaged Andrew, informing him that he was heading to the Hawthorne Company hangar to take one of the aircraft. Andrew called him back immediately. Do you need backup? That's a hostile line swimming with drug traffickers, Andrew warned. No, I think I can handle this. I'm keeping my tracker on and will send the signal when and if I need backup, Jake said. The boss was right. Kimura is involved, whether directly or indirectly. He must have made a wrong move, blab, or asked the wrong person the right question, and they come to the obvious conclusion. I doubt Ricky is safe either. Be careful, Jake, Andrew warned. Ain't I always, Jake replied, and ended the call. He could feel in his bones that time was of the essence. Finding Amelia Steele's friend at the private terminal proved simple, and persuading him to divulge the details and location of the cargo plane was even easier. Hacking into the systems, they accessed the location data of the cargo plane. Utilizing satellite imagery, they pinpointed the cargo plane, matching the provided description. You wouldn't rat me out, would you, man? I just work here, man, he said. Jake patted him on the back and walked away without giving him a reply. Upon arriving at the Hawthorne family hangar at the private terminal section in New York, an aircraft had already been prepared for him. One of the workers in blue, overall, just threw him the keys as he walked past. Thanks, Stevens, Jake greeted him and hurried his steps to the craft. A few minutes later, he was up in the air. Programming the craft to its destination, he settled in for the long ride. When Jake was approximately 4 kilometers away from the Mexican coastline, The cargo plane appeared as a small object in the distance. He was surprised to find it wrecked, with the nose submerged in water and the tail resting on the shore, smoke still emanating from the center of the remaining wreckage. Steering towards the dense foliage surrounding the waters, he scanned below for a suitable clearing to land his craft. This craft was a customized military reconnaissance and surveillance drone tailored to operate in rugged terrain, including small clearings. It was bulletproof and equipped with weaponry for defense or offensive purposes. Engineered to minimize noise, it facilitated low-altitude flight and close approaches undetected, allowing him to fly low and get close enough before landing. Jake prepared himself, armed and dressed, for his venture into the dense forest, donning his ski mask and night vision goggles. He sprayed himself with bear musk and wielded a machete to cut wide, thick leaves to cover the craft as best as he could. With his magnum drawn in one hand and the machete in the other, he ventured forth. It took a while to reach the area where the wreckage lay, but that posed no issue for someone of his training. His entire skin was covered and protected from the onslaught of insect bites. The experience triggered memories of his time in the Marines, a chapter of his life now distant. He liked to believe he had evolved since then. He recalled feeling like a lone ranger back then, with no one to rely on, consumed by anger and invisible scars. He acknowledged that if it weren't for the Hawthornes taking a chance on him, he might have met a grim fate, succumbing either to despair or to a fight he wouldn't have survived. Voices from the east caught his attention, causing him to freeze, listening intently to discern their location, numbers, and intentions. He wanted to grasp the situation, fearing that Ricky's men might have preceded him in search of Julia. Jake couldn't quite fathom why he suspected Ricky would go to such lengths to retrieve her, but he refused to dismiss the possibility. Ricky might be desperate, fearing Julia could betray him, or he might have orchestrated events to shift blame solely onto her. "I think the bitch went this way. That's a trail of blood," one of the men declared, sending Jake's heart racing. "The bitch?" Jake echoed inwardly, pondering if they referred to Julia and what she might have done to incite such fury. Peering through the foliage, he observed 4 men accompanied by 2 large hunting dogs. One wielded a firearm, while 2 carried machetes, and the others held onto the dogs. Jake opted to trail behind them, hoping their destination would somehow align with his objectives. Silently observing their intermittent pauses for the dogs to sniff the trail of blood before charging forward, it became evident they were pursuing the individual they had labeled as the bitch. "Gosh, when I find this bitch," the same voice seethed with fury, prompting Jake to realize he might need to reveal himself to offer assistance, whoever the person turned out to be. His heart skipped a beat as the dog's barks intensified, followed by a gunshot and a piercing scream that tore through the air. There was something about that scream that made his heart pound against his chest. He knew, deep down, it was Julia. Ensuring he didn't lose the men's trail as they sprinted ahead, and not wanting to alert them to his presence just yet, he carefully followed, forcing himself to remain composed despite the anguish tearing him apart inside. As they reached a cliff, the men halted, peering down into a pit. "You're dead now, bitch," the enraged man from earlier snarled into the abyss. To the others, he commanded, "Get a rope. I need to be alone with this bitch." Jake waited as they lowered the man into the pit, then attached a silencer to his magnum and sheathed his machete before drawing his hunting knife, preparing for combat. "You killed my friends, blew up our plane, and wasted thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. I'm going to enjoy killing you." The voice echoed from the depths. Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Such resilience from the never get your hands dirty Miss Davies was impressive. Taking a deep breath, seeing the men engrossed in the scene below, he approached from behind, dispatching 2 with his firearm and hurling his knife at the 3rd. The dogs growled menacingly, poised to attack. "Be good doggies and run off." "I hate to silence your barks, little buddies," Jake muttered. As the dogs advanced, their menacing growls filling the air, Jake quickly assessed his options. Spotting a nearby fallen branch, he swiftly grabbed it and tossed it a distance away, hoping to distract the dogs. "Go on, boys. Fetch," he called out in a calm, soothing tone, gesturing towards the branch. The dogs, momentarily diverted by the new object, gave Jake the chance to slowly back away, maintaining his calm demeanor and avoiding any sudden movements. With each step, he kept his gaze locked on the dogs, silently willing them to stay focused on the branch. They remain in position for a moment more before bounding off eagerly to investigate. Jake breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that he had managed to defuse the situation without harm to the animals. "Don't you just love it when people underestimate you?" Julia's unmistakable voice echoed from the ditch, prompting him to rush to the edge. He watched as she slipped something into the man's jacket, attempting to hold on to him, but he pushed her away, frantically reaching into his pockets. Jake's eyes fell on the rope tied around the man. One of the dead bodies lay atop the end of it at the cliff's edge. Without hesitation, Jake lunged for it and yanked. An explosion resounded from below. His heart leapt with the fear, terrified that he had come so close to saving her, only to witness her being blown to bits. Rising to his feet, he leaped into the pit. There she lay, crumpled and bloodied, a gash at her temple. Quickly he gathered her up, feeling the warmth of blood in his hand as he placed it at the back of her head. "Jesus," he muttered to himself as he cradled her against his body. "Stay with me, please." "I've got you," he said to her. There was too much blood. He feared she might not make it. "Jake?" she called in a barely audible voice, her voice hesitant. The pain and anguish in the faint tone tugged at his heartstrings. He avoided looking at her face. He knew he needed to remain somewhat detached to keep his fury in check. Jake carefully secured Julia to his back, using what remained of the robe to ensure she wouldn't fall. With his knives, he carved grooves into the sandy walls of the ditch, allowing him to climb out. Upon reaching the top, he kicked the dead bodies into the ditch and dropped explosives, triggering an avalanche of sand to bury them. He then disappeared into the woods before reinforcements arrived for the fallen men. It wasn't fear that drove him to flee. Rather, he knew he needed to attempt to get Julia to a hospital and see if she could still be saved. Her slow, shallow breathing weighed heavily on his mind like a ticking bomb. Upon reaching the aircraft, Jake quickly removed the leafy branches covering the entrance and managed to get Julia inside. After ensuring she was secure, he removed the camouflage entirely before settling into the pilot's seat. With the door locked and obstacles cleared, he prepared to take off but remained vigilant for any potential attacks. As if on cue, leaves and branches rustled ahead of where the attackers were stationed. Jake waited, hands poised on the weapon launcher, anticipating the first sign of movement and the poor soul that would first appear. "Over here," a male voice called out, followed by the sounds of approaching boots. Jake started the engine and allowed the craft to hover low, still prepared for confrontation. Soon enough, a group of armed men emerged, about 10 of them, and upon seeing the craft, they opened fire. "Well, I suppose I could call this self-defense," Jake muttered as he released the hold on the weapon launcher. A loud whoosh resounded in the air as the projectiles struck, leaving a path of destruction about 200 yards ahead. There was a deafening silence, save for the gentle hum of the craft's blades, as Jake lifted into the air and turned, flying low to evade branches and trees as he sought to distance himself from the scene before ascending higher to avoid further attacks aimed at the craft. Once he was certain they had distanced themselves by miles, Jake placed a call to Andrew. "Jake?" Andrew's voice echoed through the interior of the craft. Jake reached out to check Julia's pulse, fearing she might have slipped away during their escape. "I've got her," Jake reassured, noting her weak, rhythmic pulse at the base of her neck. "Great. Good job. How is she?" Andrew inquired. "Not good," Jake admitted truthfully. A moment of silence followed before he continued. "I'm sending you our location. Help me locate the nearest hospital," he implored. "Already on it." "I think we should steer clear of public clinics to avoid further trouble," Andrew suggested thoughtfully. "Yes," he exclaimed moments later, sounding triumphant. "I'm sending you a location. It's about an hour from your current position. Though I doubt he'll appreciate our intrusion, Mrs. Cavalier is still his patient," Andrew informed him. Jake furrowed his brow. "Who are you talking about?" he queried. "Rowan. The boss had us install a tracker on his phone in case Dr. Hawthorne needs assistance with her pregnancy. He's staying at a community clinic in Mariposa Bay. I'll call him to let him know you're on your way," Andrew explained. "Thank you, brother," Jake expressed his gratitude. "How bad is she, Jake?" Charles's voice joined the conversation, prompting Jake to steal a glance at Julia before quickly averting his gaze. "She's in critical condition. I suspect she has a bullet lodged in her head," Jake admitted. "Damn," both Andrew and Charles cursed in unison. "Rowan is skilled, Jake. He should be able to help," Charles reassured him. "Yeah, but I can't help but wish Dr. Hawthorne was closer," Jake lamented before sighing. "I'll catch up with you later," he added. "We're here for you, man. Just give us the word." Aidan chimed in. "Thanks, man," Jake replied before ending the call. "It's just you and me now, Miss Davies," Jake stated calmly amidst the urgency. A brief while later, he expertly guided the craft to a landing spot in the woods behind Mariposa Bay Hospital. Upon disembarking, he wasn't taken aback to find Rowan awaiting their arrival. Rowan, not in his usual white doctor's robe, wore a simple printed top paired with black trousers. "This way," Rowan's voice echoed as Jake carefully carried Julia out of the craft, hastening towards him. The two men swiftly made their way inside the building through the rear entrance, traversing a lengthy hallway until they reached a compact room brimming with surgical instruments and gadgets. The room's abundance of supplies was surprisingly impressive for a hospital situated in such a remote location, a fact that brought a sense of reassurance to Jake. As soon as he placed Julia on the surgical bed, Dr. Rowan swiftly tore off her clothing and meticulously examined her body for wounds before carefully positioning her on her side for a closer inspection of her head. Utilizing a C-arm fluoroscopy machine, Rowan scanned Julia's skull to locate where the bullets were lodged. "Father Lord," Jake heard him murmur under his breath as he stepped back, observing Dr. Rowan's careful examination of Julia's skin with his gloved hands. He then quickly connected her to monitors, checked her vital signs, and administered oxygen. With precision, he injected a sedative into the side of her neck before turning to Jake. "I'm going to need your help," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Jake took a deep, calming breath before stepping forward. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Gesturing to a nearby hand-washing basin, he instructed Jake, "Wash your hands thoroughly and assist me in shaving her hair while I prepare the drill." His gaze on the monitors displaying Julia's vital signs unwavering. "There's a bullet lodged here," he pointed to the side of her temple just on her orbital bones around the eyes. "And another here," he pointed at the back of her head. "Fortunately, none penetrated the skull, but we need to remove them and close the wounds." Jake nodded. "Understood," he replied, his mind racing through the steps of the procedure. Reading the other man's body language, it didn't seem as if Julia's case was hopeless, which gave him hope that she might pull through. Jake meticulously shaved the area around the wound while Dr. Rowan methodically prepared the surgical tools, ensuring every instrument was sterile. Though Jake doubted Julia would appreciate losing her hair, he knew it was necessary for the procedure. With focused determination, they began the delicate task of removing the lodged bullets from Julia's head. Dr. Rowan carefully marked the entry points for each bullet, ensuring precise incisions to minimize tissue damage. With steady hands, he carefully began the process of extracting the bullets, working methodically to avoid any further harm to Julia's fragile tissues. Jake stood by, handing Dr. Rowan the necessary instruments and anticipating his every need. Despite the gravity of the situation, he remained composed, channeling his focus into supporting the skilled surgeon at his side. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Rowan successfully extracted the first bullet, a wave of relief washing over Jake. With unwavering determination, they turned their attention to the second bullet, navigating the intricate pathways of Julia's skull with unwavering focus. Hours passed as they painstakingly worked to remove the remaining bullet. Finally, with a sense of accomplishment, Dr. Rowan extracted the second bullet, completing the challenging procedure. Exhausted but relieved, they closed the incisions and carefully bandaged Julia's wounds before Dr. Rowan deftly moved on to address her broken ankle. Examining the injury closely, Dr. Rowan assessed the extent of the damage before determining the best course of action. Utilizing specialized surgical instruments, he carefully realigned the broken bones, ensuring they were positioned correctly for optimal healing. With deft movements, he secured the bones in place with screws and plates, stabilizing the ankle to promote proper alignment and support. Dr. Rowan then closed the incisions meticulously, ensuring they were clean and well sealed to prevent infection. Finally, he applied a protective cast to Julia's leg and stepped back. That's it. Now we clean her up, change her clothes, and wait. What happens next is all up to her ability to fight, Dr. Rowan said. I hate to jinx this, Doctor, but do you think she will be fine? I mean, be her old self? Jake asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. She's alive, Jake. Let's give her a chance to fight the rest of the battle, the doctor replied. Jake gave him a nod, appreciating Dr. Rowan's answer. At that moment, the doctor had given him a glimmer of hope. The hope that Julia would wake up and have a second chance at least, albeit with a few scars. I'm almost scared to ask where and how you got her back. But evidently it wasn't a walk in the park for her or you, Dr. Rowan remarked, giving him a worried gaze. You're right, Doctor. Don't ask. I'd hate to put you in danger, Jake replied. Dr. Rowan let out a sigh. I'm not going to lie. I'm impressed at Nathaniel Hawthorne's dedication to keeping her alive. She is evidently mixed up with really bad people. And I'm certain you would want to move her, the other man said. It's probably for the best. That is, if you assure me she isn't going to bleed into her brain as soon as I take her away from here, Jake replied. I don't advise you to take her away, but I understand the danger she must be in around here. Will you be taking her to Dr. Hawthorne? He said. I don't think that would be wise. We need to keep her hidden so as not to make all this a wasted effort. We still don't know who engineered her kidnapping, though we know a corrupt cop is involved in giving out her location at the hospital, Jake said. Really? So a cop was responsible for that attack at our hospital? Dr. Rowan said, indignation evident in his tone. Jake nodded. Unbelievable, he said in exasperation. Then he sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. If you can get her somewhere safe and private, I can get someone to check on her. Someone totally removed from this whole situation, Dr. Rowan suggested. Okay, that's a good idea. Give me the name and address and I will contact the person. But Dr. Rowan, you know you can't let anyone know we were here, Jake implored. I understand, he replied, his tone solemn. A few minutes later, Dr. Rowan and Jake assisted the unconscious Julia back into the craft. Dr. Rowan remained behind, observing as Jake departed, flying low above the ground. Once Jake was back in the airspace of the United States, he reached out to Andrew again. All right, we need a secure location for her to recover, Jake stated. Do you recall Dr. Hawthorne's previous apartment on Madison Avenue? Andrew inquired. Yes, Jake confirmed. I'll meet with you there, Andrew replied, before ending the call. Jake arrived at Madison Avenue around 3 a.m. in the dead of night. Julia lay in the back seat, and he waited behind the wheel of his Jeep in an alley. From his vantage point, he could observe the activities in front of the apartment building and knew Andrew was ensuring the security men remained unaware of their arrival with Julia. Around 4 a.m., Charles arrived to assist them. Jake carried Julia, trying to ignore the sharp intake of breath Charles took upon seeing her. They managed to get her inside the apartment, and Jake finally laid her on a comfortable bed in one of the rooms. The doctor Dr. Rowan contacted had joined them, and she set up an intravenous drip beside the bed to administer medication directly into Julia's bloodstream, explaining it was the most effective method. Aidan, Charles, Andrew, and Jake stood around the room as the doctor worked. Jake wasn't comfortable with how still Julia was, but he figured if she were already deceased, the doctor would know. The doctor took her time attaching Julia to the machines they had smuggled inside. She seemed familiar to Jake, and he thought he must have seen her at Evergreen Memorial Hospital. When she finished, she stepped back with a sigh and looked at Andrew. I will come and check on her tomorrow. Just let me know when you'll be available and where to meet. Dr. Rowan told me how important it is to be discreet, the woman said. Of course, please come with me, Andrew said, ushering the woman out. You look like hell. You should get some rest, Aidan said to Jake. Jake nodded, flashing him a smile, trying to reassure him, needing to let them know he was fine and not wanting them to worry about him. He then left the room with Aidan. I'm certain you would want to stay and watch her, Charles said to Jake as they left the room. Yeah, I think it's best I stay until she wakes up and we can figure out the next step, Jake replied as calmly and detachedly as he could manage. Okay, then we will see you tomorrow, Charles said, patting him on the back. Aidan pulled him into a hug which almost undid him. Luckily, the men left afterward, leaving Jake alone with Julia in the apartment. He went to take a shower before going back to check on Julia. She remained as still as the doctor had left her, lying there looking like death. He quickly looked away and left the room to raid the fridge, needing to do something to distract himself from the rage building inside him. She is not yours, Jake. She is married. You helped her. That's it. You can't lose your head now, he muttered to himself repeatedly, fighting the urge to bury his fist in the wall. Back at the Hawthorne residence, Nathaniel paced while Andrew provided feedback. They had woken him up around 5 a.m., informing him they had found Julia and seeking guidance on their next move. What's your assessment of her condition? Do you think she's going to make it? Nathaniel asked, continuing his pacing as he contemplated their next steps, determined to maintain their stance regarding Julia's situation. He wanted to afford her time to heal and potentially exploit any mistakes the Camorra might make under pressure. She's held on until now. I think she might surprise us. But she looks awful, boss, Andrew replied. Nathaniel halted his pacing to meet Andrew's gaze, nodding in acknowledgement. Let's hope she pulls through. And in regard to our next move, I'm leaning towards doing nothing, giving her time to recover. However, considering her head injury, I'm skeptical. I'm no doctor, but I doubt she'll emerge unscathed. And her recovery might be prolonged. We need to prepare for the worst and watch our backs. The Camorras are clearly responsible. Sean will retaliate, and then they'll come after Ricky. It's going to get messy. Julia doesn't deserve our protection, but she's vulnerable now. Once she's back on her feet, she can make her own decisions. For now, all we can do is monitor from the shadows and protect ourselves from any repercussions, Nathaniel explained. Andrew nodded in understanding. Should we keep her at Madison? Andrew asked. Indeed, we should keep her there. I sense that those involved will be monitoring us closely, especially upon realizing neither has Julia. Well, I want to assist her. I won't do so at the expense of my family, Nathaniel asserted. Andrew nodded understandingly and suggested, we'll need someone in the apartment to keep an eye on her. I doubt Jake is much of a caregiver. Nathaniel let out a chuckle. How is he inquired, maintaining eye contact with Andrew. Andrew got his confirmation then that Nathaniel knew that Jake had feelings for Julia. As distant as ever, Andrew replied. Nathaniel nodded, a touch of sympathy in his expression. If you're unsettled by Julia's condition, I can only imagine what he must be going through, Nathaniel murmured almost inaudibly. You know about them, boss? Andrew asked, though he already knew the answer. I didn't reach where I am today by being oblivious, Andrew. My father taught me to read the room and its occupants. Jake was taken aback the first time he saw me with Julia. Then he grew cold towards her. I had Tom investigate, but it didn't matter. I know Julia. I felt sorry for Jake, though. It must have stung, Nathaniel said solemnly, then added with a touch of humor, falling for Julia of all people. It's a dreadful fate for him. Andrew chuckled softly and the two exchanged a knowing glance. But you know the heart is a strange thing, Andrew mused. Agreed. Look at me and Ariana. Remember how mean she was to me, Nathaniel recalled fondly, eliciting a laugh from Andrew. And you and Anita, I hope for your sake that it's going somewhere. Or you won't be Ariana's favorite anymore, Nathaniel warned jokingly. Andrew laughed even harder. The two sighed, sharing a moment of camaraderie. I believe it's heading somewhere. If she would have me, Andrew said in a contemplative tone, as if the realization had just struck him, and then his brows furrowed in thought. Boss, I've just had an idea, Andrew began, mischief glinting in his eyes. Let's hear it, Nathaniel replied, folding his arms across his chest, giving Andrew his full attention. Anita is a nurse. What if we speak with her and suggest she move into Dr. Hawthorne's former apartment? Her presence there would allow me and the rest of the guys to visit, and she could take care of Mrs. Cavalier at the same time, Andrew suggested. Nathaniel's brows furrowed. It's a good idea, but you're asking to take away the twins' best nanny, Nathaniel remarked. Andrew chuckled. How are you going to explain that to them? Nathaniel added, then frowned as a thought occurred to him. He let out a groan. What is it? Andrew asked, curious. Aria is going to use this to remind me that the boys need to start regular school, Nathaniel replied. Andrew laughed, well aware of Nathaniel's stance on that particular subject. We can't hide them from the world forever, boss. They're going to have to learn to navigate life on their own eventually, Andrew reasoned. Nathaniel let out a sigh. It's a great plan, Andrew. But first, you'll have to ask Anita and hear what she feels about moving there, Nathaniel advised. Do you think asking her to be my fiancée might help? Andrew probed. Nathaniel grinned. Careful, Andrew. I noticed you said be your fiancée and not marry you. If you're hoping to use that to keep her locked down, it won't work once those two hear, Nathaniel warned, causing Andrew to burst out laughing. I think I'm ready, Andrew said more seriously, letting out a sigh. Nathaniel got up to give him a hug. Congratulations then, he said to Andrew. Andrew made his way to his room, feeling a twinge of apprehension about potential rejection. His relationship with Anita often felt peculiar. Despite being 15 years his junior, she was beautiful, intelligent, and had a close relationship with Dr. Mrs. Hawthorne, granting her access to any social circle. Yet she chose to be with him. Initially, he worried she might view him as merely a temporary distraction, given his role as a security guard. However, as they spent more time together, he found himself growing more comfortable with the idea of being her man. Despite his past in the army, his current job as a security guard defined his life. He couldn't help but wonder if she ever questioned whether he was enough for her. Entering his room, he wasn't surprised to find her asleep in his bed, cradling his pillow, his heart constricted. Taking off his boots, he picked them up and placed them beside the bathroom door before stepping in for a quick shower. Afterward, he returned, drying his hair and spreading the towel on the rack. Walking naked to the other side of the bed, he slipped under the covers and carefully gathered her against his body. She stirred in her sleep, instinctively seeking solace in his arms. Feeling her warm skin against his, he let out a contented sigh. You kept me waiting all night, Anita murmured softly. Andrew pressed a tender kiss on the crown of her head. I apologize, but I'm here now. You know how demanding my job can be. Rest comes when I can, he replied. I understand, she sighed, nestling closer to him. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. I had something to tell you. I was going to wait, but since you're awake. His voice trailed off, and Anita slowly drew back to look into his eyes. Andrew noted her anxiousness, worrying he might have misread her, but he wasn't one to shy away from risks, even if they might end badly. We found Mrs. Cavalier, he divulged, watching as she rolled her eyes. Andrew chuckled in understanding. Anita's disdain for Mrs. Julia Cavalier mirrored Dr. Mrs. Hawthorne's, making the reason for her dislike obvious. She's not doing well, though, Andrew added, noticing her growing interest. What happened to her? She asked hesitantly. She survived 2 bullets to the head and a broken ankle, Andrew replied. Oh my, she said empathetically. Andrew recounted Rowan's assistance with Mrs. Cavalier's surgery and her current whereabouts. That's terrible. I may not like her, but I don't think she deserves this, she remarked. Are you empathetic enough to be her caregiver then? Andrew asked, grimacing comically in anticipation. What? Anita replied, confused. Andrew sighed and explained the situation. Poor Jake. Now I feel terrible for wishing she got hit by a moving train, Anita said. What? Andrew burst out laughing. Don't act so surprised, she replied with a narrowed gaze and comical head movements. You know we don't like Julia Davies. She reminds me of Jessica, and we don't like Jessica either. She's the real definition of a bitch, Anita defended, her tone girlishly animated, eliciting laughter from Andrew. I agree, but she needs help now. Will you help? Andrew asked in amusement. Do you realize that would mean I'd have to leave here? Anita asked, giving him a searching gaze. Andrew smiled into her eyes. Yeah, I was also thinking it might help prepare us for the future. A future I was hoping you wouldn't mind venturing into by my side. As mine? Andrew said, his eyes scanning hers for any signs of negative emotion. Anita gaped at him. Are you saying what I think you're saying? She asked hesitantly, enunciating her words as if ensuring he understood the implication of what he'd said to her. Andrew nodded. Only if you want the same, though. He began. Anita stared at him, mouth agape. Then she slowly edged out of the bed, dressed quickly, and headed for the exit. Anita? Andrew called, bemused by her reaction. Huh, she replied. Babe, where are you going? Andrew asked, confusion evident in his voice. Nowhere, she replied with an innocent stare. Okay, can you come back and let us finish our discussion? Andrew implored. Anita said, paused, and then she ran off. "What the hell?" Andrew muttered, quickly getting up, dressing and going after her. Aria was awakened by insistent knocking on the bedroom door. Sitting up, she saw Nathaniel enter through the adjoining door from the children's room, his eyebrows furrowed with a mix of curiosity and perplexity. Momentarily distracted by the sight of him fully dressed, Aria's eyes automatically darted to the table clock on her bedside table before returning to him, wondering why he was up early and dressed. "What the?" he muttered in bemusement as he headed to the door. Aria quickly got up to put on her pajamas. Nathaniel halted his strides to ensure she was decent before unlocking the door. He was surprised to find Anita staring back at him. She was in her pajamas and barefooted. "Is everything okay, Anita?" Nathaniel asked with furrowed brows. "Uh-huh," she replied, with a bewildered stare before ducking under his arm to rush towards Aria. "Anita, are you okay?" was all Aria had the chance to say before Anita grabbed her hand and dragged her into the walk-in closet. Anita shut the door behind her and turned to look at Aria, who was a tad scared of her friend's behavior. "Anita, are you okay?" Aria asked again. "Uh-huh," she replied, nodding. When she continued to nod without saying anything more, Aria reached out to cup her face and said, "Take a deep breath," coaching her, and the older woman did as she asked. "Now, does this have to do with Andrew?" Aria asked. Anita nodded emphatically. "Okay, did he do something that required us to kick his ass?" "Don't be scared of his size, we can take him." "All we need is a dash of midazolam in his tea and we can whoop his ass," Aria suggested. Anita blinked and muttered, "What?" before bursting into laughter. Then she said between giggles, "I don't think we'd be needing that for this issue, but damn, girl, it feels good to know you've got my back like that," Anita said a tad dramatically. Aria let out a laugh. "What? I got you any time, any day, bestie," she remarked. "Oh, you're the best bestie," Anita cooed and drew her into a hug. "Okay, now that you've snapped out of whatever that was, care to tell me what actually happened?" Aria asked. "I think Andrew just asked me to be his wife," Anita said in a loud whisper. "Whoa, wait. You think he asked you or he asked you?" Aria inquired in bemusement. "Oh, I didn't actually clarify that," she said awkwardly. Then she gestured backward over her shoulder before quickly pulling the door open and made to rush out, but they both found Andrew standing there with Nathaniel giving the two a weird stare. "I think they heard us," Anita whispered to Aria. Aria laughed nervously and waved at Andrew. "Of course we didn't mean whatever you heard. We like you, Andrew," Aria said. "Yup, we like you. The two of you," Anita said in a hesitant, comical way that almost made Nathaniel burst out laughing. "Just to be clear, you did ask me to marry you, right, Andrew?" Anita asked with an embarrassed grimace. Andrew nodded with a deep frown. "Got it," she said, and dragged Aria back into the closet. Then Andrew and Nathaniel heard the two scream with joy. "I'm getting married," Anita cried in evident joy. "Woohoo!" Aria echoed the joyous sentiment. "I suppose that's a yes?" Andrew muttered in somewhat bemusement. "You are one lucky bastard, Andrew," Nathaniel muttered. Andrew threw him a skeptical side glance, making Nathaniel burst out laughing. Back at Madison, Jake fashioned a makeshift bed beside where Julia lay. Despite his tumultuous emotions, he managed to fall asleep. In the early morning, the sound of Julia stirring woke him. He rose and reluctantly looked at her, tears welling in his eyes at the sight of her distress. He turned away, struggling to contain his emotions, but then he thought he heard her call his name. Thinking he must have been mistaken, he listened again as she whispered his name like a plea or prayer. Overcome with emotion and knowing she couldn't be playing games, he carefully climbed into bed beside her, gently cradling her head against his chest and soothing her with soft murmurs. "I'm here. You are safe," he repeated. Around 10 in the morning, Charles called Jake to check on him. "I'm good," Jake replied wearily. He hadn't slept much and felt exhausted. "Good. Mrs. Jonas packed some food for you." "We'll be with you shortly," Charles said. "What about the doctor?" "Andrew was supposed to bring her to check on Julia," Jake inquired. "There's been a new development," Charles replied. "New development?" Jake echoed, feeling apprehensive. "Remember, Anita is a nurse," Charles reminded him. "Yes," Jake responded, puzzled. "She's going to move in to look after Mrs. Julia." "That will give us all an excuse to come and go as we wish without arousing suspicion," Charles explained. That's a good plan, Jake mused. And Andrew is okay with this? He asked. It was his idea, and you'll be pleased to know Dr. Hawthorne is now aware of Julia's situation and is on board, Charles added. That's great news, man, Jake said, visibly relieved. That's not all, Charles continued. Jake tensed. Andrew asked Anita to marry him, Charles revealed. Jake's face lit up with a smile. Wow, the old fox finally decided to commit, huh? Jake joked, making Charles laugh. Everyone is surprised, but Anita is quite a character. Andrew deserves to be happy, Charles remarked. Damn straight, Jake agreed. Please extend my congratulations to him, he added. You can tell him yourself later when we bring your food, Charles replied. All right then, see you soon, Jake said, ending the call. He smiled to himself at the news of Andrew's impending marriage. He couldn't help but wish he'd find his own happy ending someday. But who would be brave enough to take a chance on his crazy self? Letting out a sigh, he went to check on Julia and found her still lying there, seemingly lifeless. However, as he walked out of the room, he thought he heard a groan and froze in his tracks. Returning to the room, he observed as her eyelashes fluttered open, and the eye that wasn't covered in bandages darted wildly until it settled on him. And then she swallowed hard, her lips trembling as she struggled to form words. Where? Where am I? What happened to me? Who are you? Her fear and confusion were evident in her good eye, filling Jake with dread. You don't know who I am, he asked, his heart sinking. Tears streamed down her face. No, should I? She replied, her voice barely audible. Jake approached her bed and slowly sat on the edge. Tell me, what's your name? He asked, apprehension creeping into his voice. He watched as her eye gleamed with a mix of emotions, fear, pain, bewilderment, and helplessness. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know. Why? What happened to me? Why don't I know my own name? Her lips trembled as she cried out in despair. Oh dear God, Jake muttered under his breath.